When Rowan Tate rode into that blizzard on Christmas Eve 1887, he was hunting a ghost, the man who'd stolen his wages and his faith in the world. But fate had other plans. Stranded at Eden Whitlock's boarding house, the hardened cowboy found something more dangerous than any outlaw, a woman whose kindness could break through walls he'd spent years building. This is a story of second chances where revenge meets redemption and a snowstorm changes everything. Stay with us until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The wind howled like a wounded animal across the Wyoming plains, driving snow so thick that Rowan Tate could barely see his horse's ears. Ice crystals stung his face like thrown glass, and his fingers had gone numb inside his leather gloves 2 miles back. The temperature had dropped so fast that his breath froze in his mustache, creating tiny icicles that clicked against his collar with every movement. Christmas Eve, 1887. Of all the damn times to get caught in a blizzard. Rowan pulled his hat lower and squinted through the white chaos, searching for any sign of shelter. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, following a lead that had brought him from Colorado into this godforsaken territory. Jack Cordell. The name tasted like poison in his mouth. After 5 years, the bastard had finally surfaced, and Rowan had every intention of making him answer for what he'd done. But first, he had to survive the night. The trail boss had robbed Rowan and 15 other cowboys of 6 months' wages back in '82, disappearing into the night with over $3,000 that didn't belong to him. Money that represented blistered hands, broken ribs from ornery steers, weeks away from any town or comfort. For Rowan, it had been everything he'd saved to buy his own piece of land, to finally stop drifting and put down roots. Cordell had stolen more than money. He'd stolen futures. Through the screaming wind, Rowan caught a flicker of light. His heart jumped. He urged his horse forward, the gelding's hooves crunching through snow that was already knee-deep and rising. The light grew stronger, golden and warm, impossibly inviting against the murderous white landscape. A building materialized from the storm like a mirage. 2 stories, painted white with green shutters, a wide porch already buried under drifts. More lights appeared in the windows, lanterns, he realized, and many of them. A painted sign swung violently in the wind, and Rowan could just make out the words. Whitlock Boarding House, clean rooms, home cooking, respectable. He'd take respectable. Hell, at this point, he'd take a barn. Rowan dismounted, his legs nearly buckling after hours in the saddle. He led his horse around the side of the house, grateful to find a small stable with 3 other horses already inside. At least he wouldn't be turning the animal out into this death trap. He worked quickly, his frozen fingers clumsy with the saddle and bridle, making sure the gelding had hay and water before he shouldered his saddlebags and rifle. The walk to the front porch felt like miles. Snow had drifted against the steps, and Rowan had to kick through it to reach the door. Before he could knock, it swung open, and warmth rushed out to meet him like an embrace. Dear Lord, get inside before you freeze solid. The woman who'd opened the door was in her 50s, round and rosy-cheeked, wearing a flour-dusted apron over a dark blue dress. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and pulled him across the threshold, shutting the door firmly behind him. I saw you from the kitchen window, she said, already helping him out of his snow-caked coat. Thought you were a ghost at first, riding through weather like this. You must be half frozen. Martha Whitlock, proprietor. Welcome to my establishment. Rowan Tate, ma'am. I'm grateful for the shelter. I can pay— We'll discuss payment after you thaw, Martha interrupted, hanging his coat on a rack that already held several others. $2 a night includes meals. 3 if you want a bath drawn. Right now you need to get warm before hypothermia sets in. How long were you out there? Few hours in the worst of it. Lord have mercy. She shook her head, then called toward the back of the house. Eden, bring coffee and blankets to the front room. We've got another half-frozen traveler. The boarding house's interior was a revelation after the howling wilderness outside. Dark wood floors gleamed with polish. Floral wallpaper and soft greens and creams covered the walls. A magnificent staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister wrapped in fresh pine garland tied with red ribbon. The scent of cinnamon, cloves, and baking bread filled the air, so rich and welcoming that Rowan felt something crack in his chest, a longing he'd buried years ago. "This way," Martha said, guiding him toward a doorway. "We've got a fire going in the sitting room." Rowan followed her into a spacious room that looked like Christmas had exploded inside it. A massive pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with strung popcorn, paper chains, and what must have been 100 candles, unlit now, but waiting. Garland draped every surface. A fire roared in a stone fireplace big enough to stand in. Several comfortable chairs and a sofa faced the hearth, and Rowan could see two other people, an elderly man and a middle-aged woman, looking up from their books. "Afternoon," the man said with a nod. "Hell of a day to be traveling." "Wasn't planning on the storm," Rowan replied, his voice rough from cold. "Nobody ever is." The man smiled. "Howard Green. This is my sister, Dorothy. We've been here 3 days ourselves, waiting for the weather to break." "Coffee's coming," Martha announced. "Take that chair nearest the fire, Mr. Tate. Get your blood moving again." Rowan settled into the indicated chair, so close to the flames that he could feel his frostbitten cheeks beginning to burn with the return of circulation. He pulled off his gloves, flexing fingers that looked worryingly pale. Footsteps approached from the hallway, and then a voice, younger than Martha's, but with the same warmth, said, "Coffee, hot as I could make it, and, oh." Rowan looked up. The woman standing in the doorway was perhaps 25, with dark auburn hair pinned up in a practical style that couldn't quite contain its natural wave. She wore a simple dress of deep green wool, an apron tied at her waist. But it was her face that struck him, fine-boned and lovely, yes, but there was strength there too, in the set of her jaw and the directness of her gaze. Her eyes were an unusual shade, somewhere between green and gold, and they fixed on him with unconcealed concern. "You're ice white," she said bluntly, setting down her tray and crossing to him. "Mother, look at his hands." "I was just about to," Martha said. "Mr. Tate, this is my daughter, Eden. She's got more medical sense than anyone in 30 miles. "I'm fine," Rowan started to protest, but Eden was already kneeling beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Her fingers were warm and gentle, turning his hands palm up, examining them with practiced efficiency. "Frostbite on 3 fingers," she announced. "Not severe, but you'll need to warm them gradually. Don't put them directly by the fire. That'll make it worse." She looked up at him, and Rowan found himself caught in that gold-green gaze. "This is going to hurt when the feeling comes back. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am." The corner of her mouth quirked up. "I'm not a ma'am. I'm Eden." She released his hands and stood, moving to pour coffee from the pot on the tray. "Drink this slowly. Too hot. Too fast will make you sick." Rowan accepted the cup, wrapping his hands around it carefully. The warmth seeping through the ceramic was almost painful, but he didn't care. Eden handed blankets to her mother, who draped them over his shoulders. "You'll stay for Christmas, I expect," Martha said. "No one's going anywhere in this weather. We've got 1 room left upstairs, end of the hall. Bath is down the corridor. I'll have Eden heat water once you've warmed up proper." "I appreciate it, Mrs. Whitlock." Rowan sipped the coffee, and it was so good, rich and strong, with real cream and sugar, that he had to suppress a groan of pleasure. "Call me Martha, dear. We're informal here, especially around the holidays." She settled into a chair across from him. "Where were you heading when the storm caught you?" Rowan hesitated. He'd learned long ago to be careful with the truth. "North, following a business matter." Eden, who was arranging another log on the fire, glanced back at him. Something in her expression suggested she recognized evasion when she heard it, but she didn't press. "Well, your business will have to wait," Martha said cheerfully. "Weather like this could last days, but we'll keep you comfortable. Christmas Eve supper is at 6, roast chicken, potatoes, all the fixings. Tomorrow's the real feast, of course. Turkey, ham, pies." "Mother loves Christmas," Eden said, her voice touched with affection and perhaps a hint of exasperation. "She starts planning in October." "Only proper way to do it," Martha defended. "The Lord's birthday deserves celebration. Speaking of which, Mr. Tate, I hope you don't mind, but we have traditions here. Carol singing after supper, Bible reading, that sort of thing. Nothing required, of course, but you're welcome to join." Rowan shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't celebrated Christmas, really celebrated it, since he was a boy, before his parents died, before the world taught him that hoping for good things was a fool's errand. "I'll be respectful of your traditions, ma'am. Martha." That's all anyone can ask. Martha stood, brushing off her apron. "Eden, show Mr. Tate to his room once he's warmed through. I need to check on my pies." After Martha bustled out, silence settled over the sitting room, broken only by the crackling fire and the wind howling outside. Howard and Dorothy had returned to their books. Eden remained by the hearth, using a poker to adjust the burning logs. "Been on the trail long?" she asked quietly, not looking at him. "Long enough." "And this business you're following? It's important?" Rowan studied her profile, backlit by firelight. "Yes. Important enough to risk your life riding into a blizzard on Christmas Eve?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice came out harder than he intended. "Some things need settling, regardless of the calendar." Eden turned then, meeting his eyes. "Sounds like vengeance talking." The word hit him like a fist. Rowan set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "Sounds like you're making assumptions about a stranger." "Am I wrong?" They stared at each other across the firelit room. Rowan could feel Howard and Dorothy pretending very hard not to listen. He should have been angry at Eden's presumption, her directness, the way she seemed to see right through the walls he'd built. But underneath the anger was something else. Surprise that anyone would bother to look that closely, to care enough to question. "No," he admitted finally. "You're not wrong." Eden's expression softened slightly. "Whatever it is, it'll still be there after Christmas, after the storm. Sometimes waiting makes us wiser. And sometimes waiting means letting guilty men go free." "I didn't say forget. I said wait." She picked up the coffee pot and refilled his cup without asking. "Give yourself one Christmas before you chase your ghosts. What's 3 days?" Everything, Rowan thought. 3 days was enough time for Cordell to disappear again, to slip away like smoke. 3 days was too long. But looking at Eden, at the stubborn set of her shoulders and the challenge in her eyes, he found himself saying, 3 days. She smiled then, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to something that made Rowan's breath catch. "Good. Now, can you feel your fingers yet?" He flexed them experimentally and immediately regretted it as pins and needles shot through his hands. "Unfortunately, yes. Means they're healing. Come on, I'll show you to your room. You can rest before supper." Rowan followed Eden up the staircase, his saddlebags over one shoulder, rifle in hand. The second-floor hallway was narrower than the downstairs, but just as welcoming, with more garland and several watercolor paintings of Wyoming landscapes on the walls. "Mother's work," Eden said, noticing his glance. "She paints in the summer when business is slow." "They're good." She'd be pleased to hear it. Eden stopped at the last door on the right and pushed it open. "Here we are. Not fancy, but clean and warm." The room was small but comfortable. An iron frame bed with a thick quilt, a washstand with pitcher and basin, a sturdy dresser, and a window that currently showed nothing but white chaos outside. A small stove in the corner radiated gentle heat. "We keep fires going in all the occupied rooms during winter," Eden explained. "Bathroom's 3 doors down on the left. I'll bring hot water up in about an hour, if you'd like that bath." "I would, thank you." Eden lingered in the doorway, seeming to wrestle with something. Finally she said, "Mr. Tate, Rowan, I apologize if I overstepped downstairs. Your business is your own. It's just, well, it's Christmas and you looked so cold and alone, and I suppose I—" She trailed off, color rising in her cheeks. "You suppose you what?" "I suppose I hoped you'd let yourself rest. Just for a little while." She met his eyes. "You look like a man who hasn't rested in a very long time." Rowan stood very still, afraid that if he moved, if he spoke, he might say something he couldn't take back. Because she was right. God, she was so right it hurt. He couldn't remember the last time he'd truly rested, let down his guard, stopped running from old pain or chasing old debts. "I'll try," he said finally. "For 3 days I'll try." Eden's smile returned, soft and warm as candlelight. "That's all I ask. Supper at 6. Don't be late. Mother gets fussy about her timing." After she left, closing the door quietly behind her, Rowan sank onto the bed and dropped his head into his hands. What the hell was he doing? He should be planning his next move, figuring out where Cordell was holed up, preparing for the confrontation that had driven him across 3 territories in the dead of winter. Instead, he was sitting in a warm room decorated with pine boughs, smelling Christmas dinner cooking downstairs, and thinking about a woman with gold-green eyes who saw too much. Outside, the blizzard raged on, burying the world in white. Inside, Rowan Tate began, very slowly, very reluctantly, to thaw. The bath, when Eden brought the hot water an hour later, was pure luxury. Rowan hadn't realized how much cold and dirt he'd been carrying until he sank into the steaming water and felt months of trail dust dissolving. He scrubbed until his skin was raw and pink, washed his hair twice, and finally emerged feeling almost human again. He'd packed 1 clean shirt and his only pair of pants without holes, saved for exactly this kind of situation. They weren't much, but they do for dinner in respectable company. He even attempted to tame his hair, though the dark waves had their own ideas about cooperation. 6 o'clock found him descending the stairs, following the sound of voices and the increasingly intoxicating smell of roasting chicken. The dining room was just off the main hallway, a long space with a table that could easily seat 12. Tonight it held 6. Martha at the head, Eden beside her, Howard and Dorothy on one side, and 2 empty chairs on the other. "Mr. Tate," Martha called warmly. "Perfect timing. Take that seat there next to Eden. We're just waiting on Mr. Patterson. He's been napping all afternoon." Rowan had barely settled into his chair when an elderly man shuffled in, white-haired and stooped, but with bright, mischievous eyes. Sorry, lost track of time. Reading Dickens always does that to me." "Mr. Patterson is a retired schoolteacher," Martha explained as the old man took his seat. "Now, shall we say grace?" They bowed their heads. Martha's prayer was simple and heartfelt, thanking God for safety, for shelter, for the food before them, and for bringing them all together on this holy night. When she finished with "Amen," everyone echoed it, and then the serious business of eating began. The meal was extraordinary. Rowan, accustomed to trail food and the occasional greasy restaurant dinner, could barely believe what he was tasting. The chicken was perfectly roasted, the skin crispy and seasoned with herbs. The mashed potatoes were creamy and rich with butter. There were green beans with bacon, fresh bread still warm from the oven, gravy that could make a man weep, and cranberry sauce that was both tart and sweet. "Miss Eden," he said after his 3rd bite, "did you help prepare this?" "I did most of it," Eden admitted. "Mother's hands bother her in the cold, so I've taken over most of the cooking." "Best decision I ever made, giving her the kitchen," Martha said proudly. "The girl's a natural. We've had guests come back year after year just for her cooking." Eden ducked her head, embarrassed by the praise, but Rowan could see the pleasure in her eyes. "Mother exaggerates." "She does not," Howard Green interjected. "Miss Whitlock, this is the finest meal I've had since leaving Boston, and I'm including several supposedly excellent restaurants in that comparison." The conversation flowed easily around the table. Dorothy shared news from her hometown in Pennsylvania. Mr. Patterson told amusing stories about his former students, now grown with children of their own. Martha discussed her plans for tomorrow's Christmas feast with the kind of military precision usually reserved for battle campaigns. Rowan found himself relaxing despite his intentions. These people were kind, genuine, unguarded in a way he'd almost forgotten existed. No one was trying to cheat anyone. No one was watching their backs. They were simply enjoying a meal together on Christmas Eve. Eden, seated beside him, was quiet but attentive, making sure everyone had what they needed, refilling glasses, passing dishes. Occasionally she'd catch his eye and smile, and each time Rowan felt that strange crack in his chest widen just a little more. "What brings you to Wyoming, Mr. Tate?" Mr. Patterson asked, spooning more potatoes onto his plate. "Business or pleasure?" "Business," Rowan replied carefully. "I'm a cowboy by trade." "Go where the work is." "Honest work," the old teacher nodded approvingly. "Hard work, too. I admire men who aren't afraid to earn their living with their hands." "Any family waiting for you somewhere?" Dorothy asked, her tone innocent but her eyes shrewd. "No, ma'am. I'm on my own." "By choice or by circumstance?" she pressed gently. Rowan set down his fork. Both, I suppose. Lost my parents when I was young. Never saw much point in making ties after that. An awkward silence fell. Eden broke it by standing abruptly. I'll get the pie. Mother, you made apple and mincemeat, correct? And pumpkin, Martha added. Can't have Christmas without pumpkin pie. As Eden disappeared into the kitchen, Martha leaned toward Rowan. Don't mind Dorothy. She's a romantic, always trying to matchmake. Drives her brother crazy. I don't mind, Rowan said, though he did, a little. Questions about family, about loneliness, always left him feeling raw and exposed. Eden returned with 3 pies balanced impressively on a wooden board. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg and sweet apples filled the room. Everyone made appreciative noises as she cut generous slices. This is how we celebrate Christmas Eve, Martha explained to Rowan. Good food, good company, and afterward we gather in the sitting room for carols and readings. Very traditional, very simple. Sounds nice, Rowan said, and was surprised to find he meant it. After dinner, after 2 slices of pie that were even better than the main course, they moved back to the sitting room. Eden and her mother lit the candles on the Christmas tree, and the room filled with soft, golden light. Someone, probably Martha, had placed songbooks on every chair. Now, I know not everyone sings, Martha began, settling onto the sofa, but everyone can listen. We'll start with Silent Night, nice and easy. Eden sat down at an upright piano that Rowan hadn't noticed earlier, tucked into the corner. Her fingers found the keys, and soft, sweet notes filled the room. When she began to sing, her voice clear and true, Rowan felt something inside him break completely. Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright. The others joined in, some more enthusiastically than skillfully. Rowan didn't sing, he couldn't remember the last time he'd sung anything, but he listened. He watched Eden's profile as she played, the way candlelight caught in her auburn hair, the small smile on her lips as she led them through the familiar verses. They sang 5 more carols. Hark the herald angels sing, O come all ye faithful, the first Noel, joy to the world, and O holy night. For that last one, Eden sang a verse solo, and the beauty of it, the pure, unaffected emotion in her voice, made Rowan's throat tight. When had he become so soft? When had he started caring about things like Christmas carols and candlelight? After the singing, Mr. Patterson read the nativity story from the Gospel of Luke, his schoolteacher's voice giving weight and dignity to the ancient words. Then Martha served hot cider with cinnamon sticks, and they sat around the fire, talking quietly while the storm continued its assault outside. Around 10 o'clock, people began drifting off to bed. Howard and Dorothy went first, followed by Mr. Patterson. Martha announced she had morning preparations to attend to and bid everyone good night, leaving Rowan and Eden alone in the sitting room. Eden rose to extinguish the candles on the tree. Long day, she said softly. You must be exhausted. I am, Rowan admitted. But it's a good kind of tired, different from trail tired. I know what you mean. She blew out the last candle and returned to her chair. The room was dimmer now, lit only by the fireplace, creating an intimate space that felt separate from the rest of the world. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know it's probably not what you're used to. It's not? Rowan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I'm glad I did. Eden studied him for a long moment. Can I ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to? Go ahead. This man you're looking for, the one who made you ride into a blizzard on Christmas Eve, what did he do? Rowan had told the story before to sheriffs and fellow cowboys, always with the same flat, emotionless recitation of facts. But sitting here with Eden in this warm room that smelled of pine and cinnamon, he found himself telling it differently. His name is Jack Cordell. 5 years ago, he was trail boss on a cattle drive I signed on to. We drove 3,000 head from Texas to Montana. Brutal drive, lost men, and cattle both. 3 months of hell. When we finally reached the buyer, Cordell collected payment for all of us, told us he'd distribute wages the next morning. But he didn't, Eden said quietly. No? He disappeared in the night, took every dollar. There were 16 of us, and most had families waiting, debts to pay. I lost everything I'd saved for 2 years, everything I needed to start over, to buy land, to build something that mattered. And you've been looking for him since? Not continuously. I'd hear rumors, follow leads, but he was always gone before I could catch up. Then 3 weeks ago, I met a cowboy in Colorado who'd seen him here, in Wyoming, close enough to touch, finally. Eden was silent for a moment, her face thoughtful in the firelight. And when you find him, what then? I get back what he stole. By law, if possible. By force, if necessary. By force? She repeated it flatly. You mean you'll hurt him? I mean, I'll do what needs doing. And if you kill him? Eden's voice was very soft, but there was steel underneath. If you take his life over money, because that's what it is, Rowan, money, what will you have gained? Your savings back and a rope around your neck? It's not just about money, Rowan shot back, anger rising. It's about justice, about men who think they can steal from those weaker than them and face no consequences. I understand that. Eden leaned forward, matching his intensity. I do. But revenge isn't justice, and you know it. Justice is slow and flawed, but it's the only thing that doesn't destroy the person seeking it. Rowan stood abruptly, unable to sit still under her penetrating gaze. He paced to the window, looking out at the storm. Snow had drifted against the glass, blocking most of the view. You don't know what it's like to work yourself half to death for something, to finally have it in your grasp, and then have it stolen by someone who doesn't care, who'll never care, who'll do it again to someone else. You're right. Eden's voice came from directly behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. I don't know exactly what that's like, but I know loss, Rowan. I know what it does to people, how it can hollow them out, make them hard and cold and alone. He turned. She was so close he could see gold flecks in her eyes, could smell lavender and something sweet, vanilla, maybe. Who did you lose? My father, 4 years ago. He was the kindest man I ever knew, and he died trying to help a stranger whose wagon had broken down on the road. The team spooked, and he was crushed trying to save the man's children. Her voice remained steady, but Rowan saw the pain flash across her face. The stranger didn't even stay for the funeral, just moved on like my father's life meant nothing. I'm sorry. So was I. So angry I couldn't see straight for months. I wanted to find that man, make him acknowledge what his carelessness had cost us. Mother was grieving, and we had this boarding house to run, and debts we'd never known existed, and I was 21 and furious at the whole world. What changed? Eden smiled sadly. Nothing changed. I just realized that hunting that stranger, making him pay, wouldn't bring my father back, wouldn't make Mother's grief easier, wouldn't save the boarding house. The only thing I could do was keep living, keep working, keep choosing to be kind even when the world wasn't kind to us. That's different, Rowan protested. It was an accident. Cordell knew exactly what he was doing. Maybe. But Rowan, if you catch him, if you hurt him or kill him, will it give you back those 2 years? Will it heal whatever broke inside you when he stole from you, or will it just add more weight to carry? Rowan wanted to argue, to defend his purpose, to explain that she didn't understand. But standing there in the firelight, with this woman who'd lost as much as he had, but somehow remained whole, remained kind, he couldn't find the words. I need to make it right, he said finally. I need him to face what he did. Then turn him in, find a lawman, file charges, testify in court. Let justice be justice, not revenge dressed up in noble words. She reached out, touched his arm lightly. Stay here for Christmas. 3 days won't matter in the grand scheme of things, but they might matter to you. Let yourself rest. Let yourself feel something other than anger. Then decide what kind of man you want to be when you find Cordell. Her hand was still on his arm, warm through his shirt sleeve. Rowan looked down at it, then back at her face. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't even know me. I don't know, Eden admitted. Maybe because you remind me of how I felt after Father died, so determined to make the pain mean something that you forget life can still be good. Or maybe because it's Christmas, and I'm foolish enough to believe everyone deserves a chance to come home, even if they don't know they're looking for one. Something in Rowan's chest twisted painfully. Home. When had he last thought of anywhere as home? He'd had rooms, campsites, bunkhouses, but nothing that felt like the word Eden spoke with such quiet conviction. "I don't know how to do what you're asking," he said honestly. "I don't know how to just let go." "You don't have to let go. Just set it down for a few days. I promise the burden will still be there when you pick it back up." She squeezed his arm gently, then released it. "Now, I should get to bed. Morning comes early, especially on Christmas. Good night, Rowan." "Good night, Eden." He watched her leave, her green dress whispering against the floor, and then he was alone with the dying fire and his thoughts. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage. But inside the Whitlock boarding house, something was beginning to thaw, something Rowan had thought frozen beyond recovery. He stood at the window for a long time, watching snowfall and thinking about choices. About the difference between justice and vengeance. About a woman with gold-green eyes who saw through his armor like it was made of glass. Finally, as the grandfather clock in the hall struck 11, Rowan headed upstairs to his room. He lay in the comfortable bed, warm for the first time in weeks, and listened to the wind howl. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, he dreamed not of confrontation and violence, but of candlelight and caroling and a voice singing "O Holy Night" with heartbreaking beauty. In the morning, he told himself, he'd figure out his next move. He'd plan his approach to finding Cordell. He'd remember why he'd ridden into the storm in the first place. But tonight, just for tonight, he let himself rest. Christmas morning arrived with deceptive gentleness. Rowan woke to silence, the kind of profound quiet that only comes after a blizzard has exhausted itself. Pale sunlight filtered through his window, revealing a world transformed into pristine white. Snow had drifted against the boarding house in sculptural waves, some reaching nearly to the second-floor windows. He dressed quickly, the cold air in the room making his breath visible despite the stove's efforts. Downstairs, he found the household already stirring. The scent of coffee and baking bread drew him toward the kitchen, where he discovered Eden pulling a pan of cinnamon rolls from the oven, her face flushed from the heat. "Merry Christmas," she said, looking up with a smile that did dangerous things to his resolve. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Rowan admitted. "The storm's passed." "So I see, though I doubt the roads will be clear for days." She set the pan on a cooling rack and wiped her hands on her apron. "Coffee's on the stove. Help yourself." Rowan poured a cup and leaned against the counter, watching her work. She moved with practiced efficiency, checking on a ham in the oven, stirring something on the stovetop, rolling out dough for what looked like pie crusts. Her hair was tied back with a red ribbon, and she'd changed into a dress of deep burgundy that made her skin glow. "Can I help, Butt?" he asked. Eden glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. "You cook?" "I've been feeding myself for 15 years. Might not be fancy, but I can manage the basics." "All right, then." She pointed to a bowl of potatoes. "You can peel those. There's a knife in that drawer." They worked in companionable silence for a while. The only sounds the crackling of the oven fire, the whisper of Eden's rolling pin, and the scrape of Rowan's knife against potato skins. It was domestic and peaceful, and it terrified him how much he liked it. "Your mother's still sleeping?" he asked eventually. "Her hands were aching last night. I told her to rest. I can handle the cooking." Eden crimped the edges of a pie crust with her thumbs. "She'll be down for the gift exchange, though. She loves that part." "Gift exchange?" "It's tradition. Everyone brings something small to share. Don't worry, we don't expect anything from you. You weren't planning to be here." But Rowan found himself wishing he had something to offer, some way to participate in this tradition that clearly meant so much to them. He thought of what he had in his saddlebags, nothing appropriate, nothing worth giving. The realization sat heavy in his chest. Martha appeared around 8, moving carefully, her hands wrapped in cloth to ease the inflammation. She was followed shortly by the other guests, all dressed in their best clothes, exclaiming over the fresh snow and the beautiful morning. Mr. Patterson had a red bow tie that clashed wonderfully with his white hair. Dorothy wore a cameo brooch. Howard had polished his shoes to a high shine. Breakfast was those magnificent cinnamon rolls, along with scrambled eggs, bacon, and fresh cream for the coffee. They ate in the dining room with Martha presiding over the table like a benevolent queen, making sure everyone had enough, that no cup stayed empty for long. After breakfast, they gathered in the sitting room for the gift exchange. The fire had been rebuilt to a cheerful blaze, and someone had arranged the packages beneath the Christmas tree. They were modest offerings, wrapped in brown paper and string, but given with genuine affection. Martha gave everyone hand-knitted scarves in different colors. Mr. Patterson distributed slim volumes of poetry he'd copied by hand in his elegant schoolteacher's script. Dorothy and Howard had brought chocolates from Philadelphia to share. Eden gave her mother a watercolor portrait she'd painted in secret. Martha herself, younger and laughing, captured with loving detail. "Oh, my dear girl," Martha breathed, tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful." Rowan watched from his position by the fire, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. These people were a makeshift family, brought together by circumstance but bound by choice and kindness. He envied them and ached for what they had: connection, belonging, home. Eden approached him while the others were admiring their gifts. "Walk with me?" she asked quietly. "Outside?" "The porch, at least. I need some air after all that kitchen heat." They bundled into coats and stepped out onto the front porch. The cold was sharp and clean, and the snow blazed white under the climbing sun. The world looked newborn, untouched, full of possibility. "It's too much sometimes," Eden said, leaning against the porch railing. "All that warmth and togetherness. I love it, but it can be overwhelming. Your mother's created something special here. We've created it together. After Father died, the boarding house was all we had. We could have just made it about money, about survival, but Mother insisted it be more, a place where people could feel safe, welcome. She said Father would have wanted that." Eden turned to look at him. "What about your parents? What were they like?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment, memories surfacing that he'd kept buried for years. "My mother sang all the time. In the kitchen, hanging laundry, putting me to bed. Irish songs mostly. My father was a carpenter, made beautiful things. Tables, chairs, cradles. He could look at a piece of wood and see what it wanted to become." "They sound lovely." "They were. They died of fever when I was 12, within days of each other. I went to live with an uncle who saw me as free labor, left when I was 15, never looked back." "That's when you started working as a cowboy?" "Started as a ranch hand, mucking stalls and mending fences. Worked my way up. Turned out I was good with horses, good at the hard work nobody else wanted. But I was always saving, always planning for the day I could buy my own place, build something permanent." His voice turned bitter. "Then Cordell happened." Eden reached over and took his hand. The gesture was simple, unguarded, and it nearly undid him. "You'll have that place someday, Rowan, with or without that stolen money, because you're the kind of man who builds things, not tears them down." "How can you possibly know that? You met me yesterday." "Because you're here. You could have ignored the storm, pushed through, frozen to death chasing your revenge, but you chose shelter instead. You chose to sit through Christmas Eve dinner, to listen to carols, to peel potatoes in my kitchen this morning. Those are the choices of a man who wants connection, even if he's afraid to admit it." Rowan wanted to deny it, to insist she was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he looked down at their joined hands, his rough and scarred from years of hard work, hers smaller but strong, capable. "What if I'm too broken for connection?" he asked quietly. "What if I've been alone so long I don't remember how to be anything else?" "Then you learn. Same way you learned everything else, by doing it badly at first, then getting better." She squeezed his hand. "Stay, Rowan. Not just because of the storm. Stay because you want to." Before he could answer, the front door burst open and Martha appeared, looking flustered. "Eden, dear, I need you. The ham's acting peculiar, and I can't tell if it's done or if—" "Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting?" "No, Mother." Eden released Rowan's hand reluctantly. "I'll be right there." She gave Rowan one last look, something hopeful and uncertain in her eyes, then disappeared inside. Rowan remained on the porch, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. Somewhere out there, beyond these drifts and this temporary peace, Jack Cordell was living his life, probably spending stolen money without a second thought for the men he'd ruined. The anger was still there, burning in Rowan's gut, demanding action. But Eden's words echoed in his mind. "Stay because you want to." Did he want to? The question itself was dangerous, opening doors he'd nailed shut years ago. Wanting things led to disappointment. Wanting things gave the world ammunition to hurt you. Better to want nothing, expect nothing, keep moving. And yet, he thought of Eden's gold-green eyes, the way she'd seen through his armor without flinching. He thought of Martha's kindness, Mr. Patterson's gentle wisdom, the easy camaraderie of the other guests. He thought of how it felt to wake up warm, to eat good food, to hear laughter and music. He thought of what it might be like to belong somewhere. The day unfolded with gentle rhythm. Christmas dinner was served at 2 o'clock, a feast that made last night's meal look simple by comparison. Turkey and ham, 3 kinds of potatoes, vegetables glazed with butter and brown sugar, cranberry sauce, fresh rolls, and enough pies to feed twice their number. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, telling stories between courses. Mr. Patterson shared memories of Christmases past, when his schoolhouse would host a pageant and every child in town participated. Dorothy talked about her childhood in Pennsylvania, sleigh rides and ice skating parties. Howard reminisced about his late wife, gone 10 years now, who'd made Christmas magical even when money was tight. She could transform a pine cone into a decoration worthy of a palace, he said, smiling at the memory. Had magic in her hands, that woman. My father was like that, Eden said. He could make anything special. One year we had no money for gifts, so he carved wooden ornaments for the tree. Animals, stars, angels. I still have them, wrapped in tissue paper in my room. Do you take them out? Rowan asked. Every Christmas. They go on the tree first before anything else. After dinner, they played games, charades and word puzzles, and a complicated card game that Mr. Patterson explained with professorial thoroughness. Rowan found himself laughing at Dorothy's dramatic interpretations, at Howard's terrible poker face, at the way Eden's nose crinkled when she was trying not to smile. It was ridiculous, he thought. A grown man, a cowboy who'd killed men in self-defense and ridden through every kind of hell the frontier could offer, sitting in a parlor playing parlor games, and enjoying it. As evening approached, Martha announced she needed to rest her hands. Dorothy offered to help Eden with supper preparations, leaving the men in the sitting room. Rowan found himself alone with Howard and Mr. Patterson, the older men settling into chairs with contented sighs. Fine day, Mr. Patterson observed. Miss Whitlock and her mother know how to make a celebration feel genuine. They do indeed, Howard agreed. He lit his pipe, puffing thoughtfully. Mr. Tate, you strike me as a man carrying something heavy. Forgive an old man's nosiness, but does it have to do with why you were riding through a blizzard on Christmas Eve? Rowan considered deflecting, but there was something in Howard's expression, not judgment, just understanding, that made him answer honestly. I'm tracking a man who wronged me, stole from me and others. I've been looking for him for 5 years. And you found him nearby? Close enough. Mr. Patterson leaned forward. May I offer some unsolicited wisdom from a man who spent 50 years teaching young people about consequences? Go ahead. Revenge is a story that only ends one way, badly. Either you fail to achieve it and spend your life in bitterness, or you succeed and discover it was hollow. Either way, you lose. It's not revenge, Rowan insisted. It's justice. Justice would be involving the law, Howard said mildly. What you're describing sounds more personal than that. The law failed us the first time. Cordell disappeared before any sheriff could act. If I don't do this, he'll hurt someone else. Then report him to the authorities now, Mr. Patterson suggested. You know where he is, send word, let them handle it. Your conscience will be clear, and you won't risk your own future. Rowan shook his head. You don't understand. This man took everything from me, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. He deserves to face that personally. And what about what you'll face? Howard asked quietly. Young man, I lost my wife 10 years ago to influenza. For months afterward, I was angry at God, at doctors, at everyone and everything. I wanted someone to blame, something to fight. But anger like that eats you alive from the inside. The only thing that saved me was letting it go, choosing to remember the good instead of dwelling on the loss. That's different. Your wife died of illness. Cordell chose to steal from us. The principle is the same, Mr. Patterson said. Holding on to anger, justified or not, only hurts the person holding it. I've seen it destroy promising students, turn bright young people bitter and hard. Don't let it destroy you. Rowan stood abruptly, unable to sit still under their concerned gazes. I appreciate your advice, gentlemen, but you're asking me to just let him walk away, and I can't do that. He left the sitting room and headed upstairs, needing space to think. But when he reached his room, he found he couldn't settle. He paced the small space, feeling trapped despite the comfort around him. A soft knock interrupted his restless movement. "It's Eden. May I come in?" Rowan opened the door. She stood in the hallway, still in her burgundy dress, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I made something for you," she said without preamble. "I know you weren't expecting to be here for Christmas, and I know you don't have anything to give in return, so don't feel obligated or strange about it. I wanted you to have something." She held out the package. Rowan took it, touched by the gesture even as it made him uncomfortable. "Eden, you didn't have to open it." He unwrapped the paper carefully, revealing a scarf knitted in shades of blue and gray, the colors of a winter sky. The work was beautiful, even stitches, soft wool. It must have taken hours. "I started it a few days ago," Eden admitted. "I was making extras to sell, but when you arrived yesterday, something told me to give this one to you. The colors match your eyes." Rowan ran his fingers over the scarf, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of the gift. No one had made him something, anything, in more years than he could count. "Thank you. It's beautiful. Try it on." He wrapped the scarf around his neck. It was warm and soft, and when he looked at Eden, he saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. Affection, hope, and a vulnerability that matched his own. "It suits you," she said softly. "Rowan, I heard what Howard and Mr. Patterson were saying downstairs. They're right, you know, about revenge, about what it does to people. Not you too. Especially me too." She stepped into the room uninvited and closed the door partway. "Because I care what happens to you. Because watching you torture yourself over this man is painful. Because I think you deserve better than spending your life chasing ghosts. You barely know me." "I know enough." She moved closer, looking up at him with those gold-green eyes that saw too much. "I know you're kind. You helped me in the kitchen without being asked. I know you're thoughtful. You listened to every story today. Really listened. I know you're hurting, and you think that hurt defines you. But it doesn't, Rowan. You're more than what happened to you. And what if I'm not? What if getting that money back, making Cordell pay, is the only thing I have? Then you're choosing to live as a victim instead of a survivor. Victims are powerless. Survivors build new lives." She reached up and touched his face, her hand cool against his cheek. "Build something, Rowan. With me, if you want. Or somewhere else. But build instead of destroy." He caught her hand, held it against his face, torn between wanting to believe her and knowing better. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to stay. Not just through the storm, but after. Stay in Wyoming. Find land. Build that place you've been dreaming of. Let me help you. Eden, I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. But I'm asking you to give us, a chance. Because I think you feel it too, this connection. I think you want to stay, and your pride and your anger won't let you admit it." Rowan closed his eyes, her hand still pressed to his cheek. Everything in him screamed danger. This was how you got hurt. This was how the world found your weak spots and exploited them. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. But God, he was tired of being alone, tired of sleeping cold and waking to nothing but miles of empty trail ahead. Tired of having no one to talk to, no one to share small joys with, no one who cared whether he lived or died. "What if I hurt you?" he asked, opening his eyes. "What if I'm too damaged, too angry, too—" "Then we'll work through it together. That's what people do when they care about each other." She smiled, a little tremulous. "I'm not asking for perfect, Rowan. I'm just asking for honest." He kissed her then, unable to help himself. It was clumsy and desperate, his hands coming up to frame her face, her fingers curling into his shirt. She tasted like cinnamon and hope, and when she kissed him back without hesitation, something in Rowan's chest unlocked. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Eden's cheeks were flushed, her lips slightly swollen. "That was unexpected." I've been wanting to do that since you told me off in the sitting room yesterday. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I didn't tell you off. I just suggested you might be making a terrible mistake. Same thing. He traced his thumb along her jaw, marveling that she was letting him touch her, that she'd asked him to stay. Eden, I don't know if I can be what you need. I've been alone so long. So learn not to be. I'll teach you. She caught his hand and laced their fingers together. Stay through New Year's. That's 10 days. If you still want to leave, then go. But give us 10 days to see if this could be real. 10 days. It seemed both forever and no time at all. But looking at Eden, at the hope and determination in her eyes, Rowan found himself nodding. 10 days. But I need to know where Cordell is. I need to at least what? Watch him? Confirm he's here? That's fair. We can ask around town once the road's clear, but promise me you won't confront him alone. If he's really here, we involve the sheriff. I can't promise, then I can't promise to trust you. Her voice was gentle but firm. Rowan, if you want me in your life, you have to let me in, all the way. That means not running off to do something dangerous and stupid while I'm sleeping. He should have been angry at her presumption, at the way she was trying to manage him. Instead, he felt relief. Someone cared enough to call him on his nonsense. Someone wanted him to stick around. All right, he said finally. We do this together. Legal channels. I'll report him, testify, whatever needs doing. But Eden, if he runs again, we'll deal with that if it happens. For now, just promise me you'll try. Really try to let this be a real Christmas, not just a delay in your revenge. I promise. She kissed him again, softer this time, a seal on the agreement. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Good. Now come downstairs. Mother's probably wondering where we both disappeared to, and Dorothy will have us married by morning if we're gone much longer. They returned to the sitting room to find the others settling in for evening activities. Martha had organized a puzzle on a card table. Mr. Patterson was reading aloud from A Christmas Carol, doing surprisingly good character voices. The lamps were lit, the fire was warm, and snow continued to fall gently outside, adding inches to the already impressive drifts. Rowan sat beside Eden on the sofa, acutely aware of her proximity, of the way her hand occasionally brushed his. They didn't touch openly. Martha's boarding house had standards, but there was an understanding between them now, a promise that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As Mr. Patterson read about Scrooge's redemption, about a hard man learning to open his heart before it was too late, Rowan felt the parallels keenly. He wasn't Scrooge. He'd never been cruel or miserly. But he'd been isolated, locked inside his own pain and anger, convinced that was safer than risking connection. Eden leaned closer and whispered, "It's a good story, because it's true. People can change. Hearts can thaw." You believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of anything? After Mr. Patterson finished, they sang more carols. Eden at the piano again, her voice weaving through the others. Rowan found himself joining in this time, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. His voice was rough and untrained, but Eden smiled at him over her shoulder, and that was enough. The evening wound down around 10 o'clock. Dorothy and Howard retired first, followed by Mr. Patterson. Martha kissed Eden's cheek and gave Rowan a knowing look that made him wonder exactly how much she'd observed, then disappeared upstairs. Once again, Rowan and Eden were alone in the sitting room. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in deep shadow. Outside, the wind had picked up again, not the screaming fury of yesterday, but a steady, persistent presence. More snow coming, Eden observed, moving to the window. We might be stuck here for a week. That wouldn't be so terrible. She turned to look at him, and even in the dim light he could see her smile. No, it wouldn't. Rowan joined her at the window. Beyond the glass, the world was a study in blacks and whites, dark sky, white snow, black silhouettes of distant trees. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Wyoming was like that, he'd learned. It could kill you if you weren't careful, but it was magnificent. What's your homestead like? Eden asked. You mentioned having one. It's rough. 40 acres about 20 miles north of here. Small cabin, needs work. I've been saving to expand it, add outbuildings, maybe some cattle eventually, but I haven't been there in months. Been following Cordell's trail instead. 20 miles, Eden said it thoughtfully. That's close enough to visit easily once the weather clears. You want to see it? I want to see everything about you, Rowan. The good and the difficult. Your homestead, your dreams, what makes you happy, what scares you. She turned to face him fully. I told you I'm not asking for perfect. I meant it. But I need honest and I need all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable. No one had ever asked that of him before. In his experience, people wanted the useful parts, his strength, his work ethic, his willingness to take dangerous jobs. No one had wanted the mess underneath. What if it's too much? What if the difficult parts outweigh the good? Then we'll know, and we'll make a decision. But Rowan, you can't protect me from yourself. I'm a grown woman who's run a boarding house and dealt with every kind of person imaginable. I've handled drunks, con men, heartbroken souls, and everything in between. I can handle you. There was steel in her voice, a core of strength that reminded Rowan she was Martha's daughter, practical, capable, not easily frightened. It was part of what drew him to her, this combination of kindness and backbone. All right, he said. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, I'll tell you everything, the whole ugly story. And then you can decide if you still want me to stay. Deal. Eden moved toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom. Good night, Rowan. Thank you for today, for participating, for trying. It meant something. Good night, Eden. After she'd gone upstairs, Rowan remained in the sitting room, banking the fire for the night, straightening chairs, buying time before he had to face his own thoughts in the quiet of his room. He knew what tomorrow's conversation would entail. Not just telling Eden about Cordell, but about the other things he carried. The times he'd been cheated, the fights he'd won and lost, the compromises he'd made to survive. The question was whether she'd still look at him the same way after she knew the full truth, whether the man she was asking to stay matched the reality of who he'd become. In his room, Rowan lit the lamp and sat on the bed, pulling out the scarf Eden had made him. He ran his fingers over the soft wool, thinking about the hours of work it represented, the thought behind choosing colors that matched his eyes. When had anyone paid that kind of attention to him? He wrapped the scarf around his neck again, letting its warmth settle against his skin. It felt like a promise, like hope made tangible. And for the first time in 5 years, Rowan let himself imagine a future that didn't revolve around vengeance, a future that included a home, a woman with gold-green eyes, and maybe, just maybe, peace. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering tracks and smoothing rough edges, making everything clean and new. Rowan watched it through his window until his eyes grew heavy, until sleep pulled him under into dreams that, for once, didn't feature blood and betrayal, but instead held the echo of piano music and laughter, and a hand clasped in his. Morning brought clarity in more ways than one. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a landscape so pristine it hurt to look at. Rowan stood at his window, watching the sun climb over snow-covered hills, painting everything gold and pink. The beauty was almost offensive in its perfection, as if the world was trying to convince him that fresh starts were possible. He dressed and headed downstairs, finding the household already awake. The scent of coffee and frying bacon drew him to the kitchen, where Eden stood at the stove, her hair loose around her shoulders, still in her nightdress and wrapper. She looked softer this way, younger, and when she glanced up and saw him, a blush crept across her cheeks. "You're up early," she said, turning back to the bacon to hide her face. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about our conversation." She flipped the bacon with more force than necessary. "About what you're going to tell me today." Rowan poured himself coffee, leaning against the counter. "Having second thoughts about wanting to know?" "No, just nervous." She finally looked at him directly. "What if it's worse than I imagined? What if I can't handle it?" "Then you tell me so, and I leave when the road's clear. No hard feelings." "There would be hard feelings," Eden said quietly. "I've already started caring about you, Rowan. That's not something I can just turn off." Before he could respond, Martha bustled in, fully dressed and looking more rested than she had in days. "Good morning, you two. My hands feel much better today. Eden, dear, let me finish breakfast. You should get dressed before the others come down." Eden fled, leaving Rowan alone with Martha, who gave him a long, measuring look while she took over the bacon. "My daughter's not one for half measures, Mr. Tate. When she cares about something, she commits completely. I hope you understand what that means." "I'm beginning to, ma'am. Are you worth it? Worth the risk she's taking on you?" The question was blunt, but Rowan appreciated the directness. "I don't know. I hope so. But I've got a past that might say otherwise." Martha nodded, satisfied with his honesty. "Then I suggest you make sure your present and future are better than your past. That girl's been through enough loss. I won't see her hurt by a man who can't decide what he wants. I know what I want. I'm just not sure I deserve it." Deserving is overrated. What matters is what you do with what you're given. She cracked eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. "Now, make yourself useful and set the table. We eat in 20 minutes. Breakfast was a lively affair, everyone comparing notes on how well they'd slept, discussing the spectacular morning, making plans for the day. Mr. Patterson wanted to attempt a walk, though the snow was knee-deep in places. Dorothy and Howard were content to read by the fire. Martha announced she'd be baking bread and preparing stew for supper. Eden caught Rowan's eye across the table and tilted her head toward the door, a silent invitation. After they'd eaten and helped clean up, they bundled into coats and boots and stepped outside into the crystalline morning. The cold was sharp, but not cruel, and the sun was bright enough to make them squint. They walked around the side of the boarding house to a small garden area, now buried under snow but marked by a wooden fence and a stone bench that Eden brushed clear. "My father built this," she said, sitting down and patting the space beside her. "It was Mother's birthday present the year before he died. She grows vegetables here in summer, flowers in front. It's her favorite place on the property." Rowan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long moment they simply looked out at the white expanse of Wyoming stretching before them, broken only by distant mountains and the occasional stand of trees. "Tell me," Eden said finally, "everything you think I need to know." So Rowan told her. He started with his childhood, painting a brief picture of happier times before the fever took his parents. He described his uncle's farm, the back-breaking work, the casual cruelty disguised as discipline. He talked about running away at 15 with nothing but the clothes on his back and a knife his father had made. "I lied about my age, got hired on at a ranch in Kansas. The foreman figured it out but didn't care as long as I worked hard. And I did. Worked myself half to death, actually, trying to prove I was worth keeping around." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I learned fast that the world doesn't care about fairness. The strong take from the weak, and if you want to survive, you'd better be strong." Eden's hand found his, their fingers lacing together. She didn't speak, just listened. He told her about the next 10 years, drifting from ranch to ranch, job to job, building a reputation as a reliable hand who didn't cause trouble. He told her about saving every penny, sleeping in barns when he could have afforded a room, eating one meal a day to stretch his wages further. All for the dream of owning land, of having something that belonged to him alone. Then came the drive to Montana. Biggest job I'd ever taken, best paying. 3 months of hell, but at the end, I'd have enough for a down payment on decent acreage. Maybe even enough to build a small house, buy some starter cattle. His voice hardened. Cordell was the trail boss. Seemed like a good man at first. Tough but fair, knew his business. We trusted him. He described the drive in detail, the river crossings that nearly drowned them, the stampede that killed 2 men, the endless days under brutal sun, the nights so cold their breath froze in their bedrolls. They'd lost a third of the herd but delivered the rest in good condition. The buyer paid in full, and Cordell collected the money for all 16 cowboys. He told us to get some rest, that he'd distribute wages in the morning after he'd done the accounting. We were so tired we didn't question it. I remember going to sleep that night thinking my life was about to change, that I'd finally have my chance. Eden's grip on his hand tightened. Morning came, and Cordell was gone, vanished with every cent. We reported it to the local sheriff, but Cordell had a 12-hour head start, and the sheriff wasn't inclined to chase a man over what he called a business dispute. Said we should have gotten paid nightly instead of trusting the trail boss. That's not right," Eden said, her voice hot with indignation. "The law should have helped you." "Should have, but didn't. Some of the other cowboys had families waiting. One man's wife was pregnant with their fourth child. Another had promised his wages to pay off debt. Without that money, he lost his farm. Me? I just lost my dream. Felt like losing my parents all over again. That same helpless fury. So you started looking for him. Not right away. First I tried to accept it, move on, start saving again. But every time I heard his name, every time I thought about him spending money he'd stolen, it ate at me. After about a year, I started asking questions, following rumors. I'd work a few months, save some money, then follow a lead. Never quite caught up with him until now. Rowan turned to look at Eden. That's the ugly truth. I've spent 5 years nursing a grudge, letting it poison everything else in my life. I've turned down good jobs because they'd tie me to one place. I've avoided making friends because I might have to leave at any moment. I've lived like a ghost, half alive, waiting for the day I could make Cordell pay. And now that day is here, Eden said. He's somewhere nearby, and you could find him if you wanted to. Yes. So what's stopping you? Rowan looked down at their joined hands. You are. This place, the idea that maybe there's another way to live, that maybe I don't have to be defined by what was stolen from me. Eden was quiet for a long moment, her face thoughtful. Can I tell you what I think? Please. I think you have every right to be angry. What Cordell did was wrong, and he should face consequences. But Rowan, you've already paid the price for his crime. You've given him 5 years of your life, 5 years of happiness and peace and possibility. If you go after him now with violence in your heart, you'll give him the rest of your life too. I don't want violence. I want justice. Then let's get justice. The right way. She shifted to face him fully. There's a sheriff in town about 3 miles from here. The road should be clear enough to ride by tomorrow. We'll go together, file a formal complaint, tell him everything you know. If Cordell's really here, the law can handle it. The law failed me before. Different territory, different sheriff, and this time you'll have me backing you up, along with anyone else from that drive who'll testify. We'll make sure it's taken seriously. Rowan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the system would work this time, but years of disappointment made faith difficult. And if he runs before the sheriff can act? If we wait even one day and he disappears again? Then at least you tried to do it right. At least you didn't become like him, someone who takes what he wants without caring about consequences. Eden reached up and touched his face, making him look at her. I need you to hear this. I'm not asking you to forgive Cordell or forget what he did. I'm asking you to choose who you want to be, the man who builds things or the man who destroys them, because you can't be both. The words hit Rowan like a physical blow. She was right, of course. He'd been telling himself this was about justice, about protecting future victims, about making things right. But underneath all those noble justifications was simple vengeance, the desire to hurt someone who'd hurt him. I want to be the man who builds things, he said quietly. I'm just not sure I know how anymore. Then I'll teach you. We'll teach each other. She smiled, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. Because I've got some broken parts too, Rowan. I'm not the perfect, put-together woman you might think. I'm angry sometimes, bitter about losing my father, scared that I'll end up alone running this boarding house until I'm old. I'm terrified of trusting people because everyone I've loved has left me, one way or another. I won't leave you. You can't promise that. People die, circumstances change. But what you can promise is that while you're here, you'll be present, really present, not half-gone chasing ghosts. She took a shaky breath. Can you promise me that? Rowan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her burrow into his coat. She fit against him perfectly, like she'd been made to be there. I promise. We do this your way, legal and proper, and if it doesn't work, if Cordell gets away, then I'll accept it and move forward. Because you're right. I've given him enough of my life. They sat there for a long time, holding each other in the cold morning sunshine, while the world sparkled around them like hope made visible. Rowan felt something loosen in his chest, some tight knot of anger and pain beginning to unravel. It wasn't gone, probably never would be completely, but it was loosening its grip. We should go inside, Eden said eventually, before we freeze solid and Mother has to thaw us out. They walked back hand in hand, and when they entered the boarding house, Martha took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. She didn't ask questions, just poured them hot coffee and sent them to warm up by the sitting room fire. The rest of the day passed in peaceful domesticity. Rowan helped Mr. Patterson clear a path from the front porch to the stable. Dorothy and Howard organized a reading circle, taking turns reading chapters from various books. Eden and Martha worked in the kitchen, their voices and laughter drifting through the house. Around 3 o'clock, a sound penetrated the quiet. Hoofbeats and the jingle of harness. Everyone rushed to the windows to see a mail coach struggling through the snow, the horses laboring with every step. "Mail must go through," Mr. Patterson observed, "even in weather like this." The driver, a grizzled man named Pete, who Martha clearly knew, brought news from town. The storm had hit hard, but most folks had weathered it well. The main roads were being cleared, though travel was still dangerous. And yes, he confirmed when Rowan asked carefully, there were some new folks in town, including a gambler staying at the saloon who matched Cordell's description. After Pete left with a belly full of Martha's stew and fresh bread, Rowan stood at the window watching the coach disappear into the white landscape. So Cordell was definitely here, close enough to reach. The old urge to saddle up and ride hard into town rose up in him, strong as ever. But then Eden's hand slipped into his. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "We'll go tomorrow, first thing. Together." "Together," he repeated, letting the words settle into his bones. That evening, after supper, Eden asked Rowan to walk with her again. This time they went to the stable, ostensibly to check on the horses, but really for privacy. The space was warm despite the cold outside, the animals' body heat keeping the temperature bearable. "I have something to tell you," Eden said, leaning against a stall door. "Something I should have mentioned earlier, but I was scared." Rowan felt his stomach tighten. "What is it?" "After my father died, a man came courting. Banker's son from town, nice enough, had good prospects. Mother encouraged it. She was worried about our financial situation, thought a good marriage would solve everything." Eden picked at a piece of straw, not meeting his eyes. "I almost said yes. Almost convinced myself that practical was enough, that I didn't need love or passion or any of that romantic nonsense. What changed your mind?" "I realized I'd rather be alone than settle. That my father would have wanted me to hold out for something real, something that made my heart race and my hands shake and my whole world feel bigger." She finally looked up at him. "I haven't felt that way about anyone until you walked through our door 2 days ago, half frozen and completely lost. And I know it's fast, I know it seems crazy, but I can't pretend I don't feel it." Rowan crossed to her, framing her face with his hands. "It is fast. It is crazy. And I feel it too, like I've been walking through fog for years and suddenly everything's clear." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between them. She responded with equal fervor, her arms coming around his neck, pulling him closer. They broke apart only when breathing became necessary, both flushed and slightly dazed. "I should go inside," Eden whispered, though she made no move to leave. "Mother will worry. Let her worry for 5 more minutes." Those 5 minutes stretched into 20 as they talked quietly in the dimness of the stable, sharing small stories and larger dreams. Eden wanted to expand the boarding house, maybe add a restaurant for travelers. Rowan described the homestead he envisioned, a real house with glass windows, a barn for horses and cattle, fields of wheat and hay, children's laughter filling the spaces. "That sounds perfect," Eden said. "How far is your land from here again?" 20 miles north. It's rough country, but good grazing, decent water. I've only got the 40 acres in the cabin now, but I could expand eventually." "Could you expand to include a wife?" The question was bold, her voice trembling slightly. "Hypothetically speaking." Rowan's heart kicked against his ribs. "Are you proposing to me, Miss Whitlock?" "I'm asking if you can see a future, with me in it, because I can see one, clear as day, and I need to know if I'm alone in that." "You're not alone." He pulled her close again, resting his chin on top of her head. "I can see it too. I'm terrified of it, but I can see it." They finally headed back inside as full dark fell, entering through the kitchen door to find Martha rolling out dough for tomorrow's breakfast pastries. She looked up, took in their linked hands and bright eyes, and simply nodded as if confirming something she'd already known. That night, the household gathered again in the sitting room. Someone suggested charades, and soon they were all laughing at Howard's terrible pantomiming and Dorothy's overly dramatic interpretations. Rowan found himself genuinely enjoying the simple game, the easy companionship, the warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. But underneath the laughter, tension coiled in his gut. Tomorrow they'd ride into town. Tomorrow he'd face the possibility of seeing Cordell after 5 years of searching. Tomorrow would determine whether he could truly let go of the past and embrace the future Eden was offering. Around 10 o'clock, as people began drifting off to bed, Eden caught his arm. "Don't slip away tonight. Don't ride into town alone to confront him. Promise me." "How did you know I was thinking about it?" "Because I know you. You're weighing whether to protect me from whatever might happen, whether to handle this yourself so I don't have to see the ugly parts." She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "I meant what I said. We do this together or not at all." "Eden, if things go badly, then they go badly for both of us. I'm not fragile, Rowan. I won't shatter if the world gets rough, but I will shatter if you shut me out. If you decide I can't handle the truth of who you are and what you've been through." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "I promise, together." After she'd gone upstairs, Rowan sat alone in the darkened sitting room, watching embers die in the fireplace. Tomorrow would be a reckoning, one way or another. Either Cordell would be brought to justice properly, or he'd slip away again. Either Rowan would prove he could choose a better path, or he'd fall back into the anger that had defined him for 5 years. He thought about Eden's question in the stable. Could he see a future with her? God, yes. He could see it so clearly it hurt, waking up beside her every morning, working the land together, building something real and lasting. Maybe children eventually, carrying on what they'd created. A home in every sense of the word. But he could also see the other path, the one where he let vengeance consume him, where he became the kind of man who solved problems with violence, where he ended up alone with nothing but his pride and his anger for company. The choice should have been easy. It wasn't. Because 5 years of focused hatred didn't disappear overnight, not even for love. The anger was still there, hot and demanding, insisting that Cordell needed to pay, that justice delayed was justice denied, that real men didn't run to the sheriff like children tattling to a teacher. Rowan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. The moon was nearly full, turning the snow-covered landscape into something otherworldly, beautiful and cold and indifferent to human struggles. "Help me," he whispered to the empty room, to God or the universe or whoever might be listening. "Help me choose right." No answer came, of course. Divine guidance wasn't something Rowan had ever experienced. But standing there in the quiet boarding house, surrounded by evidence of Eden's kindness and Martha's generosity, he felt something shift inside him. Not certainty, but possibility. The belief that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than his worst moments. He climbed the stairs to his room, passing Eden's door, and hearing soft movement inside. She was awake too, probably worrying about tomorrow, about whether he'd keep his promise. He wanted to knock, to reassure her, but propriety and Martha's presence down the hall kept him moving. In his room, Rowan prepared carefully for the morning. He cleaned his gun, though he hoped not to need it. He packed his saddlebags with supplies for the ride to town. He laid out his warmest clothes, knowing the journey would be cold despite the sunshine, and he wrote a letter, just in case. The letter was addressed to Eden, explaining everything he felt but might not get to say if tomorrow went sideways. He told her she'd given him hope when he'd forgotten what it felt like. He thanked her for seeing past his anger to the man underneath. He asked her to remember him kindly if the worst happened, and to know that she'd changed his life in 2 short days more than anything had in the previous 5 years. He folded the letter and put it in his breast pocket, hoping he'd get to tear it up unread. Then he lay down, still fully dressed, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Cordell's face from 5 years ago, confident, smiling, completely unsuspecting of the betrayal he was planning. Rowan's hands curled into fists, his jaw clenched, old rage flooding through him fresh and hot as the day he'd discovered the theft. The bedroom door creaked open. Rowan sat up, hand moving toward the gun on his nightstand, then relaxed as he recognized Eden's silhouette. "I couldn't sleep either," she whispered, closing the door behind her. "And I knew you couldn't. I could feel it." She crossed to the bed and sat beside him, taking his clenched fist in both her hands. Slowly, carefully, she pried his fingers open, smoothing out the tension, bringing circulation back to skin that had gone white with pressure. "Talk to me," she said. "Tell me what you're feeling right now, this minute." "I'm angry. So angry I can barely breathe. And I'm scared that when I see him tomorrow, I'll forget every promise I made. That I'll become exactly the kind of man you deserve better than. The fact that you're scared of that means you won't. Bad men don't worry about becoming bad men. They just are." She kept working his hand, her touch gentle and grounding. "What else?" "I'm terrified of losing you, of proving you wrong about me, of messing this up before it even starts. You won't lose me unless you lie to me or shut me out. Everything else we can work through." She leaned against his shoulder. "I'm scared too, you know. Scared that tomorrow will show me a side of you I can't love. Scared that you'll choose revenge over us. Scared that I'm a fool for falling this fast for a man I barely know." "You're not a fool." "Then neither are you." She turned his hand over, tracing the lines on his palm. "Rowan, tomorrow's going to be hard. Seeing him, staying calm, trusting the law when it failed you before. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. That's all I'm asking." They sat together in the darkness for a long time, drawing strength from each other's presence. Eventually, Eden stood to leave, but Rowan caught her hand. "Stay," he said. "Just to sleep. I swear, we won't. I just need you close." She should have said no, should have worried about her reputation, about what Martha would think. Instead, she kicked off her slippers and lay down beside him on top of the covers, fully clothed, maintaining propriety while offering comfort. Rowan wrapped an arm around her, and she nestled against his chest. Her breathing gradually slowed, deepened, and he thought she'd fallen asleep until she spoke. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. And then we come back here and we start building that future. Promise me." "I promise." And this time he meant it completely, without reservation. Because holding Eden in the darkness, feeling her trust and warmth and faith in him, Rowan finally understood what was at stake. It wasn't just about justice or revenge or money stolen 5 years ago. It was about the man he'd be tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that. It was about whether he'd let the past define him or whether he'd have the courage to choose something better. Sleep came eventually, bringing dreams of homesteads and wedding vows and a life that looked nothing like the lonely drifting he'd known for so long. And when the first light of dawn crept through the window, Rowan woke to find Eden already awake, watching him with those gold-green eyes that saw everything. "Ready?" she asked. "No, but let's go anyway." They rose and prepared separately, Eden slipping back to her own room to change while Rowan washed and dressed in his warmest clothes. Downstairs, Martha had coffee ready and pressed food into their hands for the journey. She hugged Eden tightly and gave Rowan a look that communicated volumes without words. Keep her safe, do the right thing, come back whole. The ride to town was cold but clear, their horses picking their way carefully through snow that had drifted unevenly across the trail. Eden rode well, comfortable in the saddle, keeping pace without complaint. They didn't talk much, saving their breath for the journey, but every so often their eyes would meet and something would pass between them. Reassurance, solidarity, shared determination. Town appeared after 90 minutes of riding, a collection of wooden buildings huddled together as if for warmth. The main street had been cleared somewhat, creating paths between the larger drifts. Signs creaked in the wind: general store, saloon, hotel, sheriff's office. Rowan's heart hammered as they tied their horses outside the sheriff's office. This was it. This was the moment that would determine everything. Eden took his hand as they climbed the steps. "Together," she reminded him. "Together," he agreed, and opened the door to whatever came next. The sheriff's office was warmer than outside, but not by much. A pot-bellied stove in the corner worked hard against the drafts that found their way through gaps in the walls. Behind a scarred wooden desk sat a man in his 50s, lean and weathered, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. A tin star was pinned to his vest, catching the light from the window. He looked up as they entered, his gaze moving from Rowan to Eden and back again, assessing. "Help you folks?" "Sheriff, my name is Rowan Tate. This is Miss Eden Whitlock. I'm here to report a crime and the man who committed it." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, which creaked under the shift in weight. I'm Sheriff Tom Brennan. What kind of crime are we talking about? Theft. 5 years ago, a trail boss named Jack Cordell stole wages from 16 cowboys at the end of a drive to Montana. Over $3,000. I have reason to believe he's here in town. Brennan's eyebrows rose slightly. 5 years is a long time to carry a grudge. It's not a grudge, it's justice, Rowan said, fighting to keep his voice level. Eden's hand tightened on his arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. Son, I'm not saying you're wrong to be angry. I'm saying 5 years makes prosecution difficult. You got proof? Witnesses? Anything beyond your word? Rowan pulled out a folded paper from his coat pocket. I kept the contract I signed for the drive. Cordell's signature is on it, along with the agreed wage. I also have names and last known locations of the other 15 men he robbed. Some of them might be willing to testify. Brennan took the paper, studying it carefully. This says you were owed $200 for 3 months' work. That's right. Plus there were bonuses for hazard pay, river crossings, handling difficult cattle. Should have been closer to $250 by the end. And Cordell just disappeared with all the money? Vanished in the night. We reported it to the sheriff in Montana, but he said it was a civil matter, not criminal, that we should have gotten paid nightly instead of trusting the trail boss. The old bitterness crept into Rowan's voice. We were too tired and too trusting. That's our crime, apparently. Eden spoke up for the first time. Sheriff Brennan, Mr. Tate has every right to seek justice for what was stolen from him, but he's here doing it the right way, through legal channels, not taking the law into his own hands. That should count for something. Brennan's expression softened slightly as he looked at Eden. You're Martha Whitlock's daughter, aren't you? Run the boarding house. Yes, sir. Your mother's a good woman. Helped my wife through a difficult time a few years back. He turned back to Rowan. All right, Mr. Tate. Let's say I believe your story, which I'm inclined to do since you took the trouble to come here instead of just shooting the man. What exactly do you want from me? I want you to arrest Cordell, hold him while we gather witnesses and evidence, charge him with theft and fraud, make him face what he did. And where is this Cordell right now? The mail coach driver said there's a gambler staying at the saloon who matches his description. I haven't confirmed it's him yet. I came here first. Brennan stood, reaching for his coat. Smart move. Shows restraint. Let's go take a look together. Miss Whitlock, you're welcome to wait here where it's warmer. I'm coming with you, Eden said firmly. Rowan doesn't face this alone. The sheriff studied her for a moment, then nodded. Suit yourself. But if there's trouble, you stay back and let me handle it. Understood? They stepped back out into the cold, walking the 2 blocks to the saloon. Rowan's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. 5 years of searching, and it might end in the next few minutes. He tried to prepare himself for disappointment. It might not be Cordell, might be someone who just looked similar, but hope and anger warred in his chest regardless. The saloon was called the Silver Dollar, and even at mid-morning, sounds of activity came from within. Brennan pushed through the doors first, Rowan and Eden following close behind. The interior was dim and smelled of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies. A few men sat at tables playing cards. The bartender polished glasses with a rag that looked dirtier than the glasses. And there, at a corner table with his back to the wall, sat a man who made Rowan's breath stop. Jack Cordell had aged some in 5 years. His hair was grayer at the temples, his face more lined. He'd put on weight, the soft kind that came from easy living. But the eyes were the same, sharp and calculating, constantly assessing angles and opportunities. He wore a fine wool suit that probably cost more than Rowan made in 6 months, and a gold watch chain glinted at his vest. Money Rowan had earned, money stolen from men who'd broken their backs and risked their lives. Cordell looked up as they approached, his gaze sliding over the sheriff with professional wariness before landing on Rowan. For a moment there was no recognition. Then his eyes widened, and Rowan saw understanding dawn, followed immediately by a calculation. Was it worth running? Well, well, Cordell said, his voice smooth as oil. Rowan Tate. Never thought I'd see you again. How have you been, boy? The casual greeting, as if they were old friends meeting by chance, made something snap inside Rowan. He lunged forward, but Eden's hand caught his arm and Brennan stepped between them. Easy, the sheriff said quietly. Let me handle this. He turned to Cordell. You Jack Cordell? I am. Who's asking? Sheriff Tom Brennan. This man has made some serious accusations against you regarding events 5 years ago in Montana. Says you stole wages from him and 15 others. Cordell's face arranged itself into an expression of wounded innocence. Sheriff, I don't know what this man told you, but there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I was trail boss on that drive, yes, but I paid every cowboy exactly what they were owed. That's a lie, Rowan said, his voice shaking with fury. You took the money and ran. I took the money to keep it safe until I could distribute it properly. Then I was robbed at gunpoint 2 towns over, lost everything, the cowboys' wages and my own earnings. I reported it to the authorities, filed papers, everything legal and proper. Cordell spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. I felt terrible about it for 5 years, but there was nothing I could do. The thieves were never caught. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Rowan could see Brennan wavering. This was how Cordell had survived, how he'd stayed free, by being a better liar than his victims were accusers. That's convenient, Eden said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You were robbed just after collecting wages for 16 men, and you never thought to reach out to those men, explain what happened, maybe try to make it right, even if it wasn't your fault. Cordell turned his attention to her, and Rowan saw the predator behind the gentleman's mask. And who might you be, miss? Someone who recognizes a lie when she hears one. Sheriff, am I really expected to defend myself against accusations from 5 years ago based on nothing but this man's word? Cordell stood, smoothing his vest. I've done nothing wrong. I'm a legitimate businessman, a gambler by trade. You can ask anyone in this town. I've been here 3 weeks and caused no trouble. 3 weeks, Rowan said. Just long enough to fleece the locals before moving on to the next town. That's your pattern, isn't it? Stay long enough to seem respectable, take what you can, then disappear. You're making serious allegations without proof, son. I could have you arrested for slander. Brennan held up a hand. Nobody's arresting anybody right now. Mr. Cordell, you say you reported this robbery 5 years ago? I did. Montana Territory town called Bozeman. Sheriff there can confirm it. That'll take weeks to verify, Rowan protested. By then, he'll be gone again. Maybe so, Brennan admitted. But I can't arrest a man based on accusations without evidence. Mr. Cordell, I'm going to ask you not to leave town while I look into this matter. Can you agree to that? Cordell smiled, and Rowan wanted to wipe that smug expression off his face with his fist. Of course, Sheriff. I'm happy to cooperate with your investigation. I have nothing to hide. They left the saloon, Rowan's hands clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. On the boardwalk outside, he spun to face Brennan. You're just letting him go? After everything I told you? I'm not letting him go. I'm investigating. There's a difference. The sheriff's voice was patient but firm. Mr. Tate, I understand your frustration, but I can't arrest someone based solely on your word against his. I need evidence, witnesses, documentation. Give me time to wire Montana, to track down some of those other cowboys you mentioned. If Cordell's lying, we'll prove it. And if he runs before you can prove it, then I'll pursue him for fleeing an investigation. But my gut says he won't run. He's too comfortable, too confident. Men like that think they're smarter than everyone else. It makes them careless. Eden pulled Rowan aside out of the sheriff's earshot. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know it feels like he's getting away with it. But Brennan's trying to help. Give him a chance. You heard Cordell? That story about being robbed, it's complete fabrication. He's had 5 years to create a perfect alibi. Maybe, but you coming here, reporting him officially, that changes things. He can't just disappear now without looking guilty. And if Brennan's right, if Cordell gets overconfident, he'll make a mistake. She touched his face, making him look at her. You did the right thing, Rowan. You chose justice over revenge. I'm proud of you. The words should have made him feel better. Instead, he felt hollowed out, cheated. He'd imagined this moment so many times, confronting Cordell, seeing justice done, finally getting closure. The reality was bitter and unsatisfying. Brennan approached them, his expression sympathetic. I know this isn't easy, but you did good coming to me. Give me a week. I'll send wires today, start gathering evidence. In the meantime, you stay out of trouble and away from Cordell. Can you do that? Rowan wanted to say no, wanted to go back into that saloon and beat the truth out of Cordell's lying mouth. But Eden's hand was in his, and her faith in him was a weight he couldn't ignore. I can do that, he said finally. 1 week. Then I want answers. They rode back to the boarding house in silence, the horses moving slowly through snow that had already started to compact and freeze. Eden tried several times to start a conversation, but Rowan couldn't shake the fury and disappointment that churned in his gut. Seeing Cordell sitting there so comfortable, so unpunished, wearing wealth built on stolen money, it was almost more than he could bear. Back at the boarding house, Martha took one look at their faces and put a pot of coffee on. The other guests were out. Mr. Patterson attempting his walk, Dorothy and Howard visiting friends in town, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Tell me, Martha said, settling at the table. Eden explained what had happened while Rowan stared into his coffee cup, watching steam rise and dissipate. He barely heard the words, lost in his own dark thoughts. A week isn't so long, Martha said when Eden finished. And Sheriff Brennan's a good man. If there's evidence to be found, he'll find it. And if there isn't, Rowan asked, his voice hollow. If Cordell's story holds up, if he really did file a report about being robbed, then what? He goes free while I'm left with nothing but the same anger I've been carrying for 5 years? Then you decide whether you're going to let that anger define the rest of your life, Martha said bluntly. You can't control what Cordell does or what the law decides, but you can control who you choose to be afterward. Rowan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. He walked out before either woman could respond, grabbing his coat and heading into the cold afternoon. His feet carried him toward the stable without conscious direction. Inside, he found his horse and began grooming it with savage efficiency, working out his frustration on the animal's coat until it gleamed. He didn't hear Eden approach until she spoke. You're going to brush the poor thing bald. Rowan set down the brush and leaned his forehead against the horse's warm neck, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and animal. I thought I could do this. I thought I could trust the system, be the better man, all of that. But seeing him there, so smug and comfortable, lying through his teeth and getting away with it, I wanted to kill him, Eden. For a moment, I genuinely wanted to put a bullet in him and damn the consequences. But you didn't. You walked away. That's what matters. Is it? He turned to face her. What if walking away just means he wins? What if being the better man just means being the bigger fool? Eden moved closer, reaching up to cup his face in both hands. Being the better man means you get to sleep at night. It means you get to look at yourself in the mirror without shame. It means you get to build a life that isn't poisoned by violence and regret. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. It means you get to have me. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but I'm choosing you anyway. She pulled his head down until their foreheads touched. Rowan, I know this hurts. I know you feel cheated and angry and helpless, but you're not helpless. You're just learning a hard truth, that sometimes justice is slow, sometimes it's imperfect, and sometimes the only victory is refusing to become what you hate. He wrapped his arms around her, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. What if I can't let it go? What if a week passes and Brennan finds nothing and Cordell walks free? What if I can't stop myself from doing something stupid? Then I'll stop you. I'll remind you of what you have to lose. I'll drag you back from the edge as many times as it takes. She pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. But I don't think you'll need me to. I think you're stronger than you believe. I think you've already made your choice, and now you're just scared of what it means. What does it mean? It means you're finally ready to stop running, to plant roots, to build instead of destroy. She smiled, though tears glinted in her eyes. It means you're ready to come home. The word hit Rowan like a physical blow. Home. When had anywhere felt like home? The boarding house came closest. Martha's kindness, the warmth of the sitting room, Eden's laughter echoing through the halls. But it wasn't his home, not really, unless he made it so. Show me your land, Eden said suddenly. Your homestead. I want to see what you're building. It's 20 miles north, and the roads are still bad. Then we'll go tomorrow when they're better, or the day after. But I want to see it, Rowan. I want to see the future you've been saving for. They returned to the house to find the other guests had come back, full of news and gossip from town. Someone had seen the confrontation at the saloon, and word had spread quickly. Public opinion, according to Mr. Patterson, who'd heard it from the postmaster, was divided. Some thought Cordell a victim of false accusations. Others remembered that he'd appeared in town 3 weeks ago with plenty of money and no clear source of income beyond gambling. These things have a way of working themselves out, Mr. Patterson said wisely. Liars eventually tangle themselves in their own webs. You just have to be patient. Patience. Rowan was discovering he had very little of it. The afternoon dragged into evening. Supper was quiet, everyone sensing his mood and giving him space. Afterward, he excused himself early and went upstairs, unable to maintain pleasant conversation when his insides were churning with frustration. He lay on his bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet his mind. Around 10 o'clock, a soft knock came at his door. "It's me," Eden's voice said. He let her in, and she came bearing a bottle and 2 glasses. "Mother's medicinal whiskey. She said you looked like you needed it." They sat together on the bed, backs against the wall, passing the bottle between them. The whiskey burned going down but settled warm in Rowan's stomach, dulling the sharp edges of his anger. "Tell me about your parents," Eden said after a while. "The good memories. What made them happy?" So Rowan told her. He talked about his mother singing, how she'd made every chore into a game with a song attached. He described his father's workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish, the satisfaction in his father's eyes when a piece of furniture came together perfectly. He remembered Christmas mornings when money was tight but love was abundant, how they'd make gifts for each other and share stories by the fire. "They sound wonderful," Eden said softly. They were. And then they were gone, and I was left with an uncle who saw me as free labor. I think that's when I learned not to trust happiness. It seemed like every time things were good, they got ripped away. Is that why you've been alone so long? Fear of losing people? Maybe. Or maybe I just convinced myself I didn't need anyone, that independence was the same as strength. He took another sip of whiskey. "You're teaching me different." "Good. Because you need people, Rowan Tate. You need connection and community and someone to come home to. You're not built for the lone wolf life, no matter how hard you've tried to convince yourself otherwise." They talked for hours, sharing stories and secrets and dreams. Eden told him about her father's death in more detail, about the anger and grief that had nearly consumed her, about the slow process of learning to live with loss instead of being destroyed by it. Rowan found himself opening up in ways he never had before, admitting fears and hopes he'd barely acknowledged to himself. Around midnight, Eden stood to leave. "Mother will have my head if she finds out I've been in your room this late." "Would it be so terrible?" Rowan asked. "If people knew you were courting me." "Courting?" Eden's smile was teasing. "Is that what we're doing?" "What would you call it?" "Falling in love, maybe, if I'm being honest." She said it lightly, but her eyes were serious, vulnerable. Rowan stood and crossed to her, taking her hands. "Then let's be honest." "I'm falling in love with you, Eden Whitlock. Have been since you first called me out on my nonsense. And when this week is over, when Brennan's finished his investigation, whatever the outcome, I want to court you properly. I want to build that homestead into something worthy of you. I want to give you a future instead of being trapped in my past." "That's all I've ever wanted to hear." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Now, I really do need to go before Mother comes looking." After she left, Rowan lay back down, but sleep was impossible. His mind kept returning to the saloon, to Cordell's smug face, to the way justice seemed just out of reach. He thought about Eden's words, about choosing to build instead of destroy. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be versus the kind of man his anger was turning him into. Somewhere around 2 a.m, he made a decision. He'd give Brennan his week. He'd stay away from Cordell, let the law do its work. And if at the end of that week nothing had changed, if Cordell walked free and unpunished, then Rowan would let it go. Really let it go. Because Eden was right. Holding on to hatred would only poison whatever future they might build together. It was the hardest decision he'd ever made, Harder than leaving his uncle's farm at 15, harder than surviving his first cattle drive. Letting go of vengeance felt like cutting off a part of himself, but he knew it was necessary. The old Rowan Tate, the one who'd ridden into the blizzard alone and angry, had to die so someone new could be born. The next morning, Rowan found Eden in the kitchen again, this time making bread. Her hands were covered in flour, and there was a smudge on her cheek that made her look absurdly young. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about what you said yesterday. I want to show you my land, today, if the weather holds." Eden's face lit up. "Really? Really? It's rough, and there's not much to see, but it's mine. And if we're going to have a future together, you should know what you're getting into." They packed supplies and informed Martha of their plans. She gave them knowing looks, but didn't object beyond insisting they take extra blankets and food. By 9 o'clock, they were riding north under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The journey took most of the morning, following roads that were more suggestions than actual paths. But gradually, the landscape changed, becoming more wild and open. Rowan felt his spirits lift as they rode. This was his country, land he'd chosen and claimed, even if he hadn't spent much time here lately. Finally, they crested a rise. And there it was, his homestead. The cabin was small, just one room, built from rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney at one end. The roof needed repair, and the door hung slightly crooked. Around it stretched 40 acres of rolling prairie, currently buried under snow but beautiful in its wild emptiness. To the west, mountains rose purple and majestic against the sky. A creek, frozen now, cut through the southern section of the property. "It's perfect," Eden breathed. Rowan looked at her incredulously. "It's a shack in the middle of nowhere." "It's potential. It's a beginning." She urged her horse forward, eager to explore. "Show me everything." He showed her the cabin first, apologizing for the dust and cold inside. It was sparse: a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a stove that hadn't been lit in months. But Eden walked through it with the concentration of an architect, measuring spaces with her eyes, planning improvements. "We could expand this way," she said, gesturing to the north wall. "Add 2 more rooms, maybe 3. And we'd need a proper kitchen, of course. The stove is good, but we'd need more counter space, storage. And windows, big windows facing south for light and warmth." "We?" Rowan asked softly. Eden turned to look at him, and her expression was open and hopeful and so beautiful it made his chest ache. "If you're asking, I know it's fast, I know we should probably wait longer, be more practical, but life's too short for practical, and I already know what I want." Rowan crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I don't have much. Just this land, a half-built dream, and a past I'm trying to outrun. But if you're willing to take a chance on me, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that trust." "Is this a proposal, Mr. Tate?" "It's a statement of intent. The actual proposal should probably wait until I've resolved this Cordell business, until I can offer you a future without that shadow hanging over it." He raised her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "But yes, Eden, when the time is right, I'm asking you to marry me. To help me build this place into a real home, to take a chance on a broken-down cowboy who's just learning what it means to hope again." "The time is right now," Eden said firmly. "The shadow will always be there in some form. The question is whether we let it control our choices. And my choice is you, Rowan. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll have me." He kissed her then, pulling her close, pouring everything he felt into that connection. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling, and not from the cold. "We should probably tell your mother before we make any formal announcements," Rowan said, trying to regain some composure. "Mother already knows. She's known since the day you arrived." Eden laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the empty cabin. "She told me this morning that any man who looks at a woman the way you look at me is either deeply in love or deeply disturbed, and she was betting on love." They spent the rest of the day exploring the property, making plans and dreaming out loud. Eden had ideas for a garden, for planting trees as windbreaks, for raising chickens and maybe a few pigs. Rowan talked about expanding his herd, building a proper barn, eventually hiring help during busy seasons. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink, they stood together looking out over the land that would be their future. 1 week, Eden said. Whatever happens with Cordell, in 1 week we start building this. Together. Together, Rowan agreed, and for the first time in 5 years, the future felt more real and more important than the past. They rode back to the boarding house in the gathering dusk, arriving just as Martha was setting supper on the table. The other guests exclaimed over their adventure, asking questions about the land and the cabin. Rowan found himself describing his homestead with pride instead of his usual reticence. And when Eden's hand found his under the table, he didn't pull away. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rowan sat alone in his room and took out the letter he'd written to Eden 2 nights ago, the one explaining everything in case he didn't survive confronting Cordell. He read it through once, then fed it to the small stove, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. He didn't need insurance against the future anymore. He was going to live it, fully and fearlessly, starting now. The week that followed was the strangest of Rowan's life. Days fell into a rhythm that was both peaceful and anticipatory, as if the whole world was holding its breath waiting for something to break. He spent his mornings helping around the boarding house, fixing a loose shutter here, reinforcing a fence post there, making himself useful while his mind churned with thoughts of Cordell and justice and the future he was trying to build. Eden was always nearby, a constant presence that both soothed and thrilled him. They worked side by side in the kitchen, their hands brushing as they prepared meals. They took walks in the snow-covered garden, talking about everything and nothing. They sat by the fire in the evenings, sometimes with the other guests, sometimes alone, building a foundation of shared moments that felt more solid than anything Rowan had ever known. On the third day, a rider arrived from town with a message from Sheriff Brennan. He'd sent wires to Montana and was waiting for responses. He'd also been asking questions around town about Cordell, gathering information. No news yet, but he was working on it. Rowan tried to feel reassured, but patience had never been his strong suit. That night, unable to sleep, he found himself standing at his bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit landscape. A soft knock at his door didn't surprise him. He knew Eden's knock by now, the particular rhythm of it. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, slipping into the room and closing the door behind her. "Keeps running through my mind. What Brennan might find, what might happen, whether I'll be able to let it go if nothing comes of it." Eden moved to stand beside him at the window. "Tell me the truth. If Cordell walks free at the end of this week, if there's no justice to be had, can you really move on, or will this eat at you forever?" It was the question Rowan had been asking himself for 3 days. He was quiet for a long time, watching clouds drift across the moon, before he answered. "I think I can. Not because I've forgiven him, or because I don't care anymore, but because I've finally got something worth protecting, and holding on to hatred would poison it. You've given me that, Eden. You've given me a reason to choose the future over the past." She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that when the week ends, something will happen that takes you away from me. That you'll ride off to confront him, or that he'll come after you, or that somehow this won't end the way I'm hoping." "What are you hoping for?" "For you to stay. For us to build that homestead together. For a life that's bigger than revenge and anger." She turned to look up at him. "For you to marry me and make me the happiest woman in Wyoming territory." Rowan's heart swelled painfully in his chest. "I want all of that too, so much it terrifies me." They stood together in the darkness, drawing strength from each other, until Eden finally pulled away with a sigh. "I should go. Mother's already suspicious about how much time we spend together." "Let her be suspicious. In a few weeks, we'll make it official." After she left, Rowan managed a few hours of restless sleep before dawn came too quickly. The fourth day brought fresh snow, just a few inches, but enough to make everything clean and new again. Mr. Patterson and Howard decided to attempt the journey home, their business in town concluded. Dorothy chose to stay a few more days, enjoying Martha's hospitality and the comfort of the boarding house. The farewells were warm, with promises to return and recommendations to friends. After they'd gone, the house felt quieter, almost hollow. Rowan found himself at loose ends, so he saddled his horse and rode into town, telling himself he just needed supplies, but knowing he was hoping for news. The general store was busy with folks restocking after the storm. Rowan gathered flour and coffee, sugar and salt, trying to look casual while his ears strained for any mention of Cordell or the sheriff's investigation. He was paying for his purchases when he overheard two men talking near the door. "Heard the sheriff's been asking questions about that gambler," one said in a low voice. "Cordell, his name is. Apparently there's some trouble from his past." "That cowboy who came to town with Martha's daughter?" the other man replied. "Folks are saying he's got a vendetta, making up stories." "Maybe. But Pete, the mail driver, said Cordell's been antsy the last few days, asking about stage schedules. How long before the roads north are fully clear? Man planning to run doesn't act like a man with a clear conscience." Rowan's pulse quickened. If Cordell was preparing to bolt, that meant the pressure was working, but it also meant time was running out. He finished his transaction and headed to the sheriff's office, where he found Brennan at his desk, surrounded by papers and telegraph forms. "Mr. Tate," Brennan greeted him. "Was about to send for you. Got some news." Rowan sat down, gripping the edge of the chair to keep his hands from shaking. "What did you find?" "Mixed bag, I'm afraid. I sent wires to 3 sheriffs in Montana, Bozeman, where Cordell claimed to file his robbery report, and 2 neighboring towns. Bozeman sheriff confirmed that yes, a Jack Cordell reported being robbed 5 years ago. Lost approximately $3,000, he claimed, to armed bandits on the road." Rowan's heart sank. "So his story checks out." "Not quite. See, I also heard back from a sheriff in a town 50 miles east of Bozeman. Turns out Cordell spent 3 days there shortly after his supposed robbery, gambling heavily and winning big. Witnesses remember him bragging about a cattle drive payday. He left town with more money than he arrived with. That proves he lied about the robbery. It suggests it strongly, but proving it in court is another matter. I've also tracked down 2 of the cowboys from your drive. One's willing to testify, says he remembers Cordell collecting the money and promising distribution. The other's scared, doesn't want trouble. So what does this mean? Can you arrest him?" Brennan leaned back in his chair. "I've got enough to bring him in for questioning, maybe hold him while I gather more evidence. But Mr. Tate, I'll be honest with you, men like Cordell are slippery. Even if we charge him, even if we go to trial, there's no guarantee of conviction. He's got money for lawyers, and he's got a plausible story about being robbed. So justice is just out of reach. Again." "I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. But here's what I'm thinking. If I bring Cordell in for questioning tomorrow, let word spread that we're building a case, one of 2 things will happen. Either he'll run, which makes him look guilty and gives me grounds to pursue him across territories, or he'll stick around and make a mistake. Or he'll lawyer up and walk free while I'm left with nothing." Brennan's expression was sympathetic. "That's possible too. But Mr. Tate, sometimes the victory isn't in seeing a man punished. Sometimes it's in standing up to him, in refusing to let him win by destroying yourself in the pursuit of revenge. You've done that. You came to me instead of taking the law into your own hands. That takes more courage than most men have." Rowan wanted to argue, to insist that moral victories weren't enough. But looking at Brennan's weathered face, at the genuine respect in his eyes, something in Rowan shifted. Maybe the sheriff was right. Maybe just choosing a different path was its own kind of justice. "When are you bringing him in?" Rowan asked. "Tomorrow morning. And Mr. Tate, I need your word you'll stay away from the saloon, away from Cordell. Let me handle this my way." "You have my word." Rowan left the sheriff's office and stood on the boardwalk, looking down the street toward the Silver Dollar Saloon. Every instinct screamed at him to march in there and confront Cordell himself, to force the truth out of him one way or another. But he'd made a promise to Brennan and to Eden and to himself. He'd chosen a different path. Instead of heading to the saloon, he rode back to the boarding house. He found Eden in the kitchen with her mother preparing supper. When she saw his face, she immediately wiped her hands on her apron and followed him to the sitting room. "What happened?" she asked as soon as they were alone. He told her everything. The mixed news from Montana, the witnesses Brennan had found, the plan to bring Cordell in for questioning. Eden listened without interrupting, her hand finding his and holding tight. "So tomorrow it ends," she said when he'd finished. "One way or another. Probably not the way I'd hoped, but maybe the way it needs to." Rowan pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing who I want to be, and I've realized something. For 5 years I've let Cordell define me. I've been the victim, the wronged party, the man seeking justice. But that's not who I want to be anymore. Who do you want to be? Your husband, a rancher, a man who builds things instead of tearing them down, a man who plants roots and keeps his promises and comes home every night to someone who matters more than any amount of stolen money. Eden pulled back to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. That's a good man to be. Then that's what I'll be, starting now. They spent the evening quietly, sitting by the fire with Martha and Dorothy, reading and talking and simply being together. Martha told stories of Eden's father, of the life they'd built before illness took him, of how she'd learned to carry on after devastating loss. It was clear she was offering Rowan a template, showing him that grief and anger didn't have to be permanent states, that it was possible to move forward. That night, Rowan slept better than he had in days. He woke before dawn feeling strangely calm, as if something had been decided in his sleep. Today, Brennan would question Cordell. Today, the 5-year chase would reach some kind of conclusion. And tomorrow, regardless of the outcome, Rowan would begin building his future with Eden. He dressed and went downstairs to find Eden already in the kitchen, making coffee in the pre-dawn darkness. She looked up when he entered, and they didn't need words. She poured 2 cups, and they sat together at the kitchen table, watching through the window as the sky gradually lightened from black to deep blue to pale gray. "Are you going to town?" Eden asked finally. "No, I gave Brennan my word I'd stay away." "Good, because I need you here. I need to know you're choosing this, choosing us, choosing to let the law handle it." "I am. I promise." They were finishing breakfast with Martha when a rider came hard up the road, his horse lathered despite the cold. He dismounted and pounded on the door, and when Martha opened it, words tumbled out in an urgent rush. "Mrs. Whitlock, is Rowan Tate here? Sheriff needs him in town right away. There's been trouble." Rowan was on his feet instantly, his heart hammering. "What kind of trouble?" "That gambler, Cordell. He tried to run. Sheriff went to bring him in for questioning this morning, found him packing to leave. There was a confrontation." The rider paused, catching his breath. "Cordell's claiming self-defense, saying the sheriff attacked him without cause. But there's more. When they searched his room, they found documents, names and amounts, records he'd kept. Looks like he's been running this con for years." Eden grabbed Rowan's arm. "I'm coming with you." They rode hard into town, the cold air burning their lungs. The streets were crowded despite the early hour. Folks gathered in clusters, whispering and staring. At the sheriff's office, they found Brennan behind his desk with a bandage on his forehead, and Cordell in the cell, looking considerably less polished than he had a few days ago. "Mr. Tate," Brennan said when they entered. "Glad you're here. You need to see this." He spread papers across his desk, a ledger with names, dates, and amounts stretching back 7 years. Rowan's name was there, along with 15 others from his drive. But there were dozens more entries, other drives, other victims. Cordell had been systematically robbing cowboys across 3 territories, keeping meticulous records like it was legitimate business. "He kept evidence of his own crimes?" Rowan asked, incredulous. "Arrogance," Brennan said. "Thought he was too smart to get caught. Wanted to remember his victories. When I went to question him this morning, he panicked and threw a punch. That's assault on a lawman, which gives me cause to search his belongings. Found this ledger hidden in a false bottom in his trunk." From the cell, Cordell spoke for the first time. "That ledger doesn't prove anything. It's just numbers. Could mean anything." "It's got names, dates, and amounts that match perfectly with drives where cowboys reported stolen wages," Brennan countered. "And I've already sent wires to sheriffs in every town listed. If even half of them come back confirming your pattern, you'll be facing charges in multiple territories." Rowan moved closer to the cell, looking at the man who'd haunted him for 5 years. In the harsh morning light, Cordell looked smaller somehow, diminished. The fine suit was rumpled, the confident smile gone, replaced by something closer to fear. "Why?" Rowan asked. "You had legitimate skills. You could have made an honest living. Why steal from men who'd already earned their pay the hardest way possible?" Cordell sneered, some of his old arrogance returning. "Because it was easy. You idiots trusted me, worked yourselves to death, then handed me everything without question. Why would I break my back for wages when I could just take yours?" The casual contempt in his voice sparked something in Rowan, but before he could respond, Eden's hand found his. He looked down at her, at the steady strength in her eyes, and the anger drained away as quickly as it had come. "You're pathetic," Rowan said to Cordell, his voice calm and clear. "You think you're clever, but all you've done is steal from better men than you'll ever be. And now you'll pay for it. Not because I forced it, not because I took the law into my own hands, but because your own arrogance caught you." He turned to Brennan. "What happens now?" "Now I hold him while I gather testimony. With this ledger, I can track down dozens of victims. Even if some cases are too old to prosecute, we'll have enough to put him away for years." Brennan stood and extended his hand to Rowan. "You did good, Mr. Tate. You trusted the system when it failed you before. That took guts." Rowan shook the sheriff's hand, feeling something loosen in his chest, the last coil of anger and resentment finally releasing. "Thank you for taking this seriously, for doing it right." Outside the sheriff's office, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast about Cordell's arrest, and several people wanted to shake Rowan's hand, to tell him they'd known something was wrong about that slick gambler, to offer congratulations. Rowan accepted their words with quiet grace, but all he really wanted was to be alone with Eden. They walked to the edge of town, to a spot overlooking the valley where the boarding house sat like a promise of warmth in the distance. The sun was fully up now, painting everything gold, making the snow sparkle like diamonds scattered across the earth. "It's over," Eden said softly. "Really over." "Yes." Rowan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind, both of them looking out at the beautiful winter morning. "And it ended the right way. Not the way I imagined 5 years ago, but better. Because I didn't become like him. I didn't let hatred poison me completely. You're a good man, Rowan Tate. I'm trying to be. For you. For us." He turned her to face him, taking both her hands in his. "Marry me, Eden. Not someday. Not when the timing's perfect. Soon. As soon as we can arrange it." Eden's smile was radiant, brighter than the morning sun. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. They kissed there on the hill overlooking their future, and when they finally broke apart, both were laughing with pure joy. The ride back to the boarding house felt like flying, their horses cantering through snow that no longer seemed cold, but magical, transformative. Martha met them at the door, took one look at their faces, and pulled them both into a fierce hug. "I take it there's good news?" "Cordell's been arrested," Rowan said. "Evidence found, charges pending. It's over." "And we're getting married," Eden added, her voice bubbling with happiness. "As soon as possible." "Well, it's about time," Martha declared, laughing through tears. "I've already started planning the wedding feast in my head. We'll do it right, with the whole town invited. Spring wedding, I think, when the wildflowers are blooming." The next weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Rowan rode to his homestead and began repairs in earnest, working from dawn to dusk to expand the cabin and make it livable for two. He hired 2 men from town to help, and together they added 2 rooms, replaced the roof, installed proper windows, and built a kitchen that would make Eden smile. Eden divided her time between helping her mother at the boarding house and riding out to the homestead to supervise improvements. She had opinions about everything, where the furniture should go, how the garden should be laid out, what colors to paint which rooms. Rowan discovered he loved hearing her opinions, loved watching her transform his rough bachelor quarters into a real home. News arrived regularly from Sheriff Brennan. 5 more cowboys had been located and confirmed Cordell's theft. 2 other sheriffs had matching reports. The case was solid. Cordell would face trial in the spring, and conviction was all but certain. Justice, slow and imperfect but real, was finally happening. As February melted into March, the Wyoming landscape transformed. Snow receded to reveal brown grass that would soon turn green. The creek on Rowan's property thawed and began to sing. Early wildflowers appeared in protected spots, dots of purple and yellow against the dull earth. And then it was April, and the prairie exploded into bloom. Purple lupine and yellow arrowleaf balsam root covered the hills in waves of color. The sky was impossibly blue, the air warm and sweet. It was perfect. The wedding took place on a Sunday afternoon with half the town in attendance. They held it outside at the homestead, the cabin serving as backdrop, the mountains rising majestic in the distance. A circuit preacher performed the ceremony under an arch that Martha and Dorothy had decorated with fresh pine boughs and wildflowers. Eden wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had altered from her own wedding gown. Wildflowers were woven through her auburn hair. She was so beautiful that when Rowan first saw her walking toward him across the prairie grass, he forgot to breathe. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Rowan promising to build her a life of love and security, to choose her every day over anger in the past, to be the man she deserved. Eden promising to stand beside him through hardship and joy, to make their house a home, to never let him forget that he was loved. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers. Mr. Patterson was there, having traveled from his new home specifically for the wedding. Howard and Dorothy had made the journey from Philadelphia. Sheriff Brennan attended with his wife, and Pete the mail driver, and dozens of others who'd been touched by Martha's kindness or impressed by Rowan's restraint. The celebration lasted until well after dark. Martha and her helpers had prepared a feast that people would talk about for years: roasted beef and ham, fresh bread and butter, vegetables from the root cellar, and pies of every description. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts, stories shared and friendships cemented. As night fell and lanterns were lit, Rowan found himself standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching Eden dance with her mother, his wife. The words still felt strange and wonderful in his mind. She caught his eye and smiled, and the love in that smile was so clear and uncomplicated that it still took his breath away. "You did well, son," a voice said beside him. Sheriff Brennan had appeared with 2 glasses of whiskey, offering one to Rowan. "Got your justice and your girl. Not many men manage both. I almost threw it all away chasing the justice part. But you didn't, that's what matters." Brennan clinked his glass against Rowan's. "Here's to new beginnings." They drank, and the whiskey was smooth and warm, tasting like celebration. After Brennan moved off to rejoin his wife, Martha approached with Eden in tow. "Mother wants to say something," Eden said, squeezing Rowan's hand. Martha looked between them, her eyes bright with tears. "I just wanted to tell you both how proud I am. Rowan, when you walked through my door on Christmas Eve, you were lost and angry and about to make a terrible mistake. But you chose differently. You chose love over hate, building over destroying. That's the mark of a truly strong man." "I had good teachers," Rowan said, his own throat tight with emotion. "And Eden, my darling girl, you took a risk on a stranger, saw something good in him when he couldn't see it in himself. Your father would be so proud of the woman you've become, of the choice you've made." Martha pulled them both into a hug. "Be happy. Build something beautiful together. That's all any parent wants for their child." Later, after the last guests had departed and the cabin was quiet, Rowan and Eden stood on their porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. The prairie stretched before them, dark and vast and full of possibility. This was their land now, their home, their future. "What are you thinking?" Eden asked, leaning against him. "That I rode into a blizzard 6 months ago hunting a ghost, and instead I found everything I didn't know I was looking for." He turned to face her, framing her face with his hands. "You saved me, Eden. In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I was drifting too, going through the motions, convinced I'd end up alone running a boarding house until I was old and bitter. You reminded me that life could be an adventure, that love was worth the risk." They went inside to the home they'd built together, and as Rowan closed the door on the beautiful spring night, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. 5 years of anger and searching, all leading to one Christmas Eve blizzard. If someone had told him then that the storm wasn't trapping him but delivering him to his future, he never would have believed it. But it was true. That blizzard had been a gift, forcing him to stop running long enough to see what he'd been missing. And now, standing in his own home with his wife in his arms, Rowan understood that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as obstacles, that sometimes losing your way is the only path to finding where you truly belong. Summer brought prosperity. The garden Eden planted flourished in the Wyoming sun, providing more vegetables than they could eat. Rowan's small herd of cattle grew, supplemented by calves born in the spring. He hired a hand to help with the heavier work, and together they built a barn that was the pride of the county. Martha moved into the homestead in July, taking one of the new rooms and declaring herself ready for retirement. She spent her days painting watercolors of the landscape, tending her flowers, and spoiling Eden with advice and affection. The boarding house was sold to a young couple from Denver with Martha's blessing and the promise that they'd maintain her traditions. News came in August that Cordell had been convicted and sentenced to 15 years hard labor. Restitution had been ordered, though collecting it would take time. Rowan received a check for his stolen wages plus interest, enough to buy another 40 acres adjoining his property. He cashed the check without ceremony and used the money to expand his herd, turning the page on that chapter of his life completely. In September, Eden told him she was pregnant. The news came one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach and said simply, "We're going to have a baby." Rowan's vision blurred with tears. A baby. A child who would grow up knowing love and security, who would never have to drift alone or wonder if they mattered. A child who would inherit this land and the life they were building. It felt like a completion, a circle closing in the best possible way. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Good. So am I. But we'll figure it out together." Eden leaned her head on his shoulder. "Just like we figured out everything else." Winter came again, bringing snow that covered the prairie in familiar white. But this winter was different from the one before. This winter, Rowan had a home filled with warmth and laughter. He had a wife who challenged and cherished him in equal measure. He had a mother-in-law who'd become the parent he'd lost so young. He had land and cattle and a future that looked brighter with every passing day. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after he'd ridden into Martha's boarding house seeking only shelter from a storm, they gathered around the fireplace in their expanded cabin. Martha read the nativity story while Eden played carols on the piano they'd bought in October. Outside, snow fell gently, peacefully, adding to drifts that would melt in spring and water the land. Rowan sat in his chair, Eden beside him, her hand resting on the small swell of her stomach where their child grew. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, bitter and angry, consumed by the need for vengeance, convinced that justice was the only thing that could heal him. He'd been wrong. Justice had helped, yes. Seeing Cordell punished had provided closure. But what had truly healed him was love. The love of a good woman who'd seen past his anger to the man underneath. The love of a mother-in-law who'd welcomed him without reservation. The love of a community that had accepted him as one of their own. Most of all, he'd learned to love himself, to forgive his younger self for trusting the wrong person, to accept that being hurt didn't make him weak, to believe that he deserved happiness and could build a life worth living. "What are you thinking about?" Eden whispered, her head on his shoulder. "How far we've traveled. How much has changed." "Any regrets?" Rowan looked around the warm cabin, at Martha reading by lamplight, at the Christmas tree decorated with wooden ornaments and strings of popcorn, at his wife's peaceful face. Outside, the same Wyoming wind that had once seemed so hostile now sounded protective, a guardian circling their home. "Not a single one," he said, and meant it completely. As Martha finished the familiar story and closed the Bible, as Eden began to play Silent Night with her clear voice rising sweet and pure, Rowan closed his eyes and sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For the blizzard that had forced him to stop running. For the boarding house that had offered him more than shelter. For the woman who'd taught him that building a future was braver than destroying the past. He'd come to Wyoming seeking vengeance and found redemption instead. He'd arrived as a broken, angry cowboy and become a husband, soon-to-be father, landowner, and most importantly, a man at peace with himself. The cowboy's Christmas bride had given him everything he'd never known to ask for, everything he'd stopped believing he deserved. And as the carol ended and Eden smiled at him through the candlelight, Rowan knew with absolute certainty that this was where he belonged, that this was what home meant, and that the best part of the story was just beginning. Outside, the snow continued to fall, gentle and persistent, covering the land in grace. Inside, the fire burned warm and bright, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the house that love had built. And somewhere between the earth and sky, past and future, loss and hope, Rowan Tate finally found his peace. The end.